Hi, this is the full supercut version of an Iceberg chart series I created a few months ago. Parts 1, 2, and 3 are available on my channel if you want to watch them all individually. But this right here is the full trilogy. Before we start, I want to let you know a few things before going in, assuming you haven't seen the other parts. This Iceberg chart is sorted based on popularity and obscurity, not by how bad the people or artwork is on a moral scale. I know there's been a trend of going from light to dark topics recently, but the original premise of an Iceberg chart goes from well-known to lesser-known entries. If you're confused as to why people like Shadman are on the top, then there's your reason. I did try my best to sort it accurately to the best of my knowledge, but honestly looking back, I probably should have put some entries much higher or much lower. Also, some controversies are much more tame than others. A controversy or being infamous doesn't necessarily mean they've committed a crime or did a horrible action. Sometimes it could just be because people didn't like what they did or made for whatever reason. Of course, this is nowhere near a comprehensive list, as I'm barely scratching the surface of horrible art and artists to talk about. The ones on this Iceberg chart are mostly based on my personal knowledge and memories of them. Final point, here's a list of every single YouTuber that helped me with the research for some of these entries. Could not have done this without them. Massive thank you to them all. With all of that out of the way, thank you all for tuning in, and let's begin with the full infamous internet art/artist Iceberg. As the name implies, this is any and all artwork that has the intention of sexual gratification for either the artist or the viewer, specifically with more unorthodox areas of the body, certain situations, or just objects in general. With the rise of the internet, this sort of art has been made much more easy to access and view. Good for the gooners and coomers out there, I guess, but not so much for everybody else. Some examples of fetish art genres include vor, inflation, armpits, feet, giantess, diapers, bodily waste, ENF. I also want to make it clear that honestly, it's perfectly fine if you have some weird fetishes and like to draw or consume them. There's only really a problem once you start showing these images to people who aren't comfortable with them, or children in general. As long as you're keeping it within the confines of your 18+ community, then go crazy, I guess. A majority of you watching probably already know who this person is, so I'm going to try my best to explain in the simplest, briefest way possible, because there's hours upon hours of lore to uncover on your own time. Dubbed as the most documented individual probably ever, Christine Weston Chandler is a 42-year-old high-functioning autistic trans woman with a long list of controversies and mishaps. This was accompanied by a decades-long trolling campaign the internet has taken out on Chris, which has led to incident after incident, and a 60+ episode-long documentary series by Gino Samuel. The reason why they're on this Iceberg is because of a comic they made back in the early 2000s, which has piqued the interest of millions of people, that comic being Sonichu. What originally started out as the adventures and life of Sonichu slowly just turned into a comic about Chris themselves. This comic is, well, it's not good. But that hasn't stopped Chris from becoming one of the most infamous artists on the internet. On August 1st, 2021, they were arrested for the crime of incest that they did to their own mother, who is 82 years old and may possibly have dementia.
Christian, what's up? Kill stream, baby! When you get out, let's do the kill stream! Look me up! When charges drop.
Where the case was later dropped by the court. Again, I literally cannot fathom explaining everything in this video. If you want more lore, then go check out Gino Samuel or any other creators. The Wojak, or Feels Guy, is a popular meme format that's taken many variants throughout the years, usually used to mock somebody or represent a certain type of person by drawing them in a very unflattering way, using the base Wojak as a template. The origins of the original Wojak are relatively unknown, but we do know that they were named after a member of CrowdChan called Wojak. Wojak says he found the original image off a Polish image board, but the true artist behind the Wojak is still unknown. For the most part, this meme has stayed on image boards like 4chan and the like in the 2010s, but around 2020 is where the Wojak completely blew up all over the internet. This is where you get your chads, virgins, tradwives, e-thoughts, etc. And also whatever the hell these variants are. A subspecies of the Wojak emerged from this, being dubbed the Soyjak. Soyjaks are a combination of the Wojak and the soy boy. Soy boys are a phenomenon of men who get made fun of for, simply put, being losers. The soy drinking, Nintendo Switch loving, patchy beard having, glasses wearing, wife sharing, Marvel slop enjoying, vegan consuming, science obsessing guy that seems to be everywhere is the essence of one of these soy boys. Soyjaks often depict these men pointing at things that they might enjoy or in various positions that make them look more annoying. These are often traced over real images of people and spread around, leading to people copying the poses in real life to further make fun of them. In 2020, the user Soot created a new image board as a joke called Soyjak.party after the Quay board was banned on 4chan, used for exclusively posting Soyjaks. This is where things get weird and controversial. Soyjak.party, otherwise known as the Shardy, had sort of an island effect for Soyjaks. These jacks would devolve into abhorrent and incomprehensible abominations when given their own exclusive platform to thrive on. On screen are some examples. Then things, of course, got offensive, and started to depict ethnic groups and other visible minorities in horrible ways, as things usually go on image boards. For more information, check out these videos on screen. Tim Buckley is a webcomic artist mostly known for his series Control-Alt-Delete, following the self-insert character of Ethan, his girlfriend and epic gamer girl Lila, and his roommate Lucas. The webcomic mostly follows Ethan and his hijinks with video games. As a concept, I guess, it's kinda hard to describe. They just play video games, or talk about video games, or try to get more video games, or make jokes about video games, etc. It's very one note. The whole webcomic is just, only real gamers get this one. Suffice to say, it's not good. Tim decided to draw one set of stock images back in like 2002, and he's been using them ever since for almost a decade, with very little improvement in his art style. It's just extremely lazy and not appealing to look at the same pose for the 1000th time. Eventually, the webcomic dropped the whole video game-centered focus, thank God. But Ethan just became like every other adult animated comedy protagonist, meaning eccentric and wacky adventures in life with zero improvement to the writing. People obviously did not like this, and got upset that they couldn't laugh at what the f***? But Tim didn't care. On February 15th, 2008, Control-Alt-Delete entered its pregnancy arc, where Lila tells Ethan that she's pregnant, and then he pisses himself. Keep in mind, this arc was inspired by real-life events that happened in his life, meaning his actual girlfriend was pregnant during this time. Sadly though, on June 2nd, 2008, Tim posted his most infamous and well-known strip to the public, where Lila has a miscarriage, titled Loss. And yes, this was also inspired by real-life events. People did not like the strip at all, mainly because of the huge change in tone that came out of nowhere. Control-Alt-Delete was supposed to be a comedy about video games, now it's delving into real-life miscarriages and dark topics. Not to mention being pretty disrespectful to his own girlfriend, where he draws his OCs going through what she had to go through, almost like he's playing dolls. Loss actually has a part 2 and 3 with the aftermath of the miscarriage, and then gets right back to the jokes only a week later that same month. The strip garnered so much negative attention that people made several iterations of it with different characters and scenarios. This has been going on for over 15 years now. It's gotten to the point where this minimalist version with a bunch of lines is used as sort of a Where's Waldo game to see if you can find Lost in the wild. Funnily enough, on June 2nd, 2018, for the 10-year anniversary of Lost, Tim actually posted this strip where Ethan smirks at the audience at the end, as an acknowledgement to the meme status of this strip. Hotdiggedydemon, also known as MaxDesignPro, is an animator and YouTuber who's been posting online since 2003, and YouTube since around 2007, uploading his first video after dropping out of the Art Institute of Boston. Max is most well known for many original animations and parodies he's made throughout the years, like Wacky Game Jokes for Kids, Jerry, the .mov series, and most recently Brain Dump. However, some of the animations and drawings he's made haven't really gone over too well with people online, landing him in many controversies for his more edgy and shock humor era past. One of the most notable controversies being a drawing he posted on Tumblr on May 1st, 2015, called Steven's Universe, where he drew Steven with stereotypical Jewish features like a long nose and all that. There's also the lesser known Steven... I can't say that one, but you get the picture. Not to mention a lot of his series containing many slurs which I can't show you for obvious reasons. However, in the Brain Dump episode, wow, world's biggest house of cards, 2021 world record. Max directly addresses his controversial past and apologizes for a lot of the more offensive shock jock humor he was doing back then.
Tell me, silly bald man, do you have a dream? Well, that question kinda has a complicated answer. I used to want to be an artist, but I bungled that dream along the way somewhere. Irreparably. Burned too many bridges, squandered too many opportunities, made too many mistakes. Now I'm just trying to figure out what to do with the rest of my life now that everything I used to want is no longer on the table. And to make ends meet, I humiliate myself on the internet for money. which I suppose is all an elongated way of saying, I'm a YouTuber.
I'm sorry for all my problematic jokes. I'm sorry for everyone I've ever been obnoxious to because I was too socially to know how to interact the right way. I want to be a good person. I really do. But nobody ever taught me how because I never had any friends. And I'm sorry I said just now. I know I'm not supposed to say that word anymore, but it's hard because I've been saying it my whole life and I forget sometimes. I don't mean nothing by it. I just forget is all.
He says his focus from then on will be on more meaningful work that isn't just made to piss people off as a joke. I obviously have a lot of bias here because I've been a fan of Max since the Jerry days, but I'm glad he's moved on from blatantly edgy humor to focus on other projects which honestly I still enjoy. Stonetoss, also known as Hans Christian Grabner, is a webcomic artist primarily focusing on political cartoons and comic strips in that sphere. The Stonetoss webcomic began in June of 2017 and quickly grew a fanbase from there, where he would later join Twitter and became enemy number one given the content of his comics. You see, Stonetoss's comics fall into two categories: edgy satire that's actually kind of funny sometimes, or alt-right leaning conspiracy theories, and offensive prejudice against women, trans people, gay people, minorities, etc. Many people call Stonetoss a neo-Nazi given the kind of material he draws, and it's not really hard to understand why. Stonetoss has responded to these claims, assuring that he's not a neo-Nazi because I have featured works from other artists, including multiple artists of color. Ah, I see. The old "I have tons of black friends" excuse. An absolute classic. He's also friends with another infamous online artist named Antoons, who I'll get into later. Stonetoss began selling some of his work as NFTs, which apparently sold out in 20 minutes, gaining him $2 million in the process, including the Among Us meme he was involved in that blew up around early 2021, and also one of George Floyd. In March of 2024, users managed to find Stonetoss's real identity and published it online, which included his real name and face. He of course then went to Elon Musk and got him to suspend all the accounts that doxed him. Honestly, while Stonetoss tells people he isn't a neo-Nazi or harbors any of those views, it becomes kind of apparent what his views are on certain topics by reading his comic. If he had just stuck to being funny and stopped with the right-wing stuff, he probably wouldn't have had people dox him. Hey, it's Richie from the future. I just want to pop in and say that I don't think anyone necessarily deserves to get doxed. But what I am saying is that Stonetoss did piss off a lot of people on purpose, so I'm not surprised that some people took it a little too far and decided to dox him. The CalArts Style is a certain art style that is/was popular for cartoons around the 2010s. People started to notice that almost every currently airing cartoon had the same similar art style, having originated from the students of the California Institute of the Arts. This style was criticized heavily for looking too simplistic and being overused. For example, every character has a bean mouth, thin line work, round proportions, etc. This image here represents a lot of the talking points surrounding this debate. Things escalated quickly when a new show called Thundercats Roar debuted its trailer in 2019, which pissed a lot of people off with the art direction that the show took.
Hey there everyone, my name's Lion-O, and I'm the star of a new show called Thundercats Roar. Wait, you don't know what a Thundercat is? Well, let's start small. I'm a Thundercat, and this is my magic slicing stick, Sword of Omens. Give me sight beyond sight.
Now look, I understand that people are getting sick and tired of this art style, and trust me, so am I. But it's not really the fault of the animators who work on these shows. A lot of the time, it's the higher-ups and executives who make these decisions because they think they know what's best for the IP. In other words, how can I turn this cartoon into a profit? Not to mention, we've had many fads in animation for certain art styles since forever. All the cartoons you see here are from the 80s with the exact same art style. These things come and go. And thankfully, it looks like the 2020s are ushering in a new era for animation and art styles. Jesus Christ, where the f do I begin with this guy? Shadman, also known as Shadai, is probably the most well-known and infamous artist on this list. In short, Shad makes NSFW drawings and posts them online for his very degenerate fanbase. He's become one of the most hated and controversial figures on the internet, and has sprung back into the limelight with the Ava Chris Tyson situation recently. Shadman in his early days attended art school in Switzerland, where he was later kicked out due to highly illegal material. Now if you've read your history books, you know this doesn't end well. This became a big part of Shad's identity later on in his online career. Eventually, he found success as an NSFW artist on Newgrounds in 2009, also dabbling into comics here and there. Shad's entire brand and persona was centered around being as humanely offensive and edgy as possible, drawing the most f***ed up and cruel things you can imagine. Instead of being blacklisted or taken down though, he actually grew to become insanely popular on the internet in the 2010s. It seems as though he was also friends with and collaborated with dozens of different YouTubers, artists, and animators. Somehow, this guy whose profile picture is based off of a Schutzstaffel SS officer managed to get all this attention and nobody seemed to care. Although most followed and interacted with Shad only because of his meme status, as the guy who drew f***ed up shit. Not many people knew of his controversies and followed him because he was just a big meme online. As he grew in notoriety, he started to release some of that highly illegal content on social media and his website. This was Shad's lolly art, which were drawings of presumably underage girls doing lewd acts. Now many of you might be saying, come on Richie, they're all fictional, they're not real, it's not hurting anyone. And sure, yes, they aren't real. But don't you think it's still at the very least super weird to enjoy and consume this? Yeah, they might be fictional characters, but you're still getting off to the idea of them being underage and the way they're physically drawn. Also, this argument gets completely tossed out the window when you realize Shad has drawn multiple real-life children in NSFW scenarios with full graphic detail. One of them was of Daphne Keane getting essayed, who was 12 at the time. He was later sent to cease and desist by her lawyers. Another was the 11-year-old YouTuber Lieutenant Corbus. This was after he said he regretted making this type of art and promised to stop. And possibly the worst of all was when Shad promised to draw Keemstar's 7-year-old daughter giving Trump a blowjob if he won the election. And of course, out of all, he decided to keep that promise. Keemstar unsurprisingly threatened to call the cops, and Shad only took it down because of the YouTuber Colossalus Crazy confronting him about it, who he had respect for. We also can't forget that time when he drew Ed Gould getting essayed by the Grim Reaper almost immediately after he died of cancer in 2012. By 2019, his antics had caught up with him as he revealed that he was being investigated by Hollywood and thankfully would stop with the lolly content. Not to mention all the drama and burned bridges because of his actions. Many of his friends had dropped him at this point and nobody wanted anything to do with them anymore. Later, on October 28th of 2021, Shad was arrested for assault and attempted murder with a deadly weapon in Los Angeles. It was also revealed that he was now a heroin addict and had sold most of his art supplies to fund his crippling addiction to drugs. This is probably what caused the incident, actually. Shad somehow was released from jail after this incident, and is currently roaming the streets of LA. Truly the Epstein of the internet. Racist Mario is an animated parody of Mario Kart made by the animation channel Flashgits, uploaded on August 5th, 2014. The animation follows Mario as he cleanses the racetrack of all the non-Nintendo characters, before moving on to everyone else who he sees as race traitors. Get it? He's a racist because of, racing. Anyway, Mario brutally maims, bludgeons, injures, and kills almost every character in the animation, until Kratos from God of War manages to put his head on a stick at the very end, winning the race. This animation was quite controversial, with a lot of people who didn't find the joke of, look, family-friendly thing is now adult and violent, to be funny. To be fair, the entire shtick of Flashgits is almost exactly that, so this is pretty on brand for them. There's also a lot of edgy jokes and a very sexual thumbnail mixed in with brutal violence, which didn't help it staying monetized for long. In fact, on April 23rd of 2017, YouTube directly told Flashgits to change the thumbnail or have the entire video be removed. So in protest, they decided to change Princess Peach from being topless to wearing a burqa. Watching this video again after 10 years kinda makes me realize how much my humor has changed, because I just sat there with a straight face wondering how I laughed my ass off at this in 2014. It's not even the edginess or shock value that I don't like, there's just no joke besides violence. Khyle, or Khylery, is an immensely popular Twitter artist from the Philippines that mainly draws popular memes with the inclusion of anime characters, or just humorous art pieces in general, sometimes towing the line between offensive and funny, as you're about to see. Khyle made their account in 2016, however their oldest post is from 2020. Maybe they just lurked around for 4 years and started to post randomly, or maybe there's some lost media and artworks that are now deleted. Anyway, as you can see from these images, their drawings started out in a very different style than what we're used to today. They're more rough around the edges and sketch-like, instead of fully rendered painting-like pieces. This would continue for a while until April of 2021, where we started to see a lot more anime content and the early stages of their current style. This new style blew up in popularity, and each post got thousands of likes. This would continue until a certain incident that happened on a very specific day. On January 27th, 2023, Khyle posted this piece which shows Anya from Spy X Family on a field trip, being picked up and crying. At first, everything seems pretty normal, until you start to look closer. Up here, we see an intentionally designed sign that reads, Arbeit macht frei, or in English, work sets you free. This sign appears at the gate of the Auschwitz concentration camp in Poland. It should also be noted that January 27th is also Holocaust Remembrance Day, so people didn't exactly take this one too well. The post went completely viral and people had many differing opinions. A lot of people didn't appreciate the Holocaust joke being made on Holocaust Remembrance Day, or the fact that somebody drew anime characters at a place where millions of people died. Others had a different take and suggested that Anya was sad because she was learning about what happened there, and there isn't really any joke to be made. Others pointed out that the children in the background had pickaxes, which implied that they were being sent to the camp to work. The post was deleted almost immediately after the backlash. However, they just kinda kept posting more art like nothing happened. In fact, that post propelled them into even higher amounts of fame. And Khyle to this day continues what they're known for. In 2020, John Bob was probably one of the fastest growing Twitter artists / animators out there, mainly known for a multitude of collaborations and networking he did with other artists online. John began his rise in 2019 from a Choose Your Own Adventure animated series he did, where his followers would pick out the next scene to be animated. This went viral and got him in contact with a ton of huge artists and animators that praised his style and talent. Most of John's work from then on was collaborations, by bringing artists together and making a friend group. It honestly felt like this guy was the main character and everybody was his friend. They were even on his banner. Also, pay attention to this guy here. He's more important down later in the iceberg. More people would join and meet others, almost like he had made his own networking page. John's personality was very wholesome, kind, and nice. At least, that's how he presented himself online. On his private account, John would make many questionable tweets that went from just odd to, oh my god, why are you sharing this? Including NSFW of him and his friends, probably without their consent. On August 18th, a mutual friend of John named Get Good Nami was outed as being a groomer by a 15-year-old victim, sharing that Nami also had other victims he had successfully obtained lewd photos of. Later, on August 31st, John decided to shoot himself in the foot and randomly confess he sexted a 15-year-old at the age of 18, even pestering her to do RP and draw NSFW. Except this wasn't completely out of the blue. John claims that he had immense guilt for his own actions after seeing Nami get called out, and decided to be righteous about his own misgivings, essentially confessing out of the goodness of his heart. This was a lie. He mentions in the initial tweet that the victim contacted him after a while to confront him about his behavior towards her. Leaked messages also show him panicking after she threatened to out him, deciding ultimately that he would do it first. This was probably done to garner sympathy and try to paint himself as a good person, as mentioned before. The backlash from this post was so strong that he pussied out and deactivated his account, but then decided to come back, apologize, then deactivate a second time, this time for good. All of the friends he had made were obviously disgusted by these actions and ceased all contact with him. All except the guy I mentioned earlier, who seemed a little too sympathetic towards him being outed. Obviously, none of his friends knew of his actions behind the scenes, and just thought he was a cool guy they could share their art with. John Bob has since not returned, thankfully, and I hope to God he never does. If you want more information, check out the video by Bedhead Bernie, linked below. William Borba is a professional illustrator and comic artist with years of experience in the industry. He also owns a DeviantArt account where he posts some of his illustrations and comics he does in his free time for fun. After seeing Zootopia in 2016, Borba was inspired to create a ton of Zootopia alternate universe comics in March of 2017, most of which see Judy and Nick in a relationship. Now, when you sit down and think about it, how exactly would interspecies breeding work within the context of this movie? In real life, the offspring usually can't reproduce themselves, so they die off and can't continue the hybrid legacy. We don't even see any interspecies couples or children in the movie, so it'll be a mystery as to how they're going to handle that in the sequel. Borba also asked this question, and created a parody comic called I Will Survive, dealing with the ramifications of a bunny getting impregnated by a fox. The comic itself is available online, and I suggest you all go give it a read, because it's actually genuinely compelling and has a crazy twist in the sequels. Spoilers, but Judy wants an abortion and Nick wants to keep it, leading to a huge fight. Judy is rightfully scared about what's going to happen because in this universe, this has never happened before. Would it survive? Would it kill her? Would it go rabid and kill them both? Would they call them boxes or funnies? Really important questions to think about. Personally, here's my headcanon for the sake of Disney being family friendly. So when the child is in the uterus, there's a 50-50 chance it's the species of either parent, similar to how the sex of the child is 50-50 as well. Meaning they can either have a fox that's a boy or girl, or a bunny that's a boy or girl. Anyway, the comic ends up going viral, and this panel is probably the one you're most familiar with. Because of how it ends though, people started to speculate that Borba was injecting some sort of pro-life propaganda into the comic, even though he states multiple times that it should not be taken seriously and that it's all just for fun. This led to Borba creating a sequel where he continued the story further. Those, however, didn't go as viral as the first one did. He makes it abundantly clear that these are all jokes and don't contain any of his real-life opinions on these touchy subjects. I highly recommend reading them though because they're honestly really good. Squizxy, also known as Hyojin Choi, was an artist and animator most well known for her animations on YouTube and live streams on Twitch. Hyojin had been posting on Tumblr and Twitter for a while, but her career was boosted around mid-2016 when she began appearing in the videos of the large YouTuber Pyrocytical.
Hey, I have a joke.
Zaptai is homosexual.
What's the joke?
You're making me really pissed.
I hate you.
I'm in a mech, and I'm playing with
Hyojin.
Eva, and she's in a mech.
I have cancer now.
It turns out the both of them were dating, and Pyro began to feature her a lot more, giving Hyojin a platform to post her art and animations to a larger audience. In fact, this is where I found her and became a fan because of our shared sense of humor. Hyojin also collaborated with a bunch of other online creators at the time, including Quite, King Ani, Bluesdank, Dolan Dark, Slazo, Lord Bung, and Akai Nail War. The last two, in fact, were frequent guests on her stream and had their own successful careers. They even formed a podcast together called the Pubcast. Already though, Hyojin garnered some controversies that I'm surprised most people don't talk about. She was accused of bullying someone named Giddy and also several others, by inviting them to group chats just to mock them. Allegedly, she also accused Giddy of wanting to sleep with the YouTuber NoFuckers, and mocked the death of her cat. There's also the accusation of animal abuse, but that was proven to be mostly highly exaggerated, so I'm not going to include it. However, this did get people digging into her past, and they found some things. It turns out Hyojin had a secret NSFW account where she would draw porn of YouTubers and whatever else she felt like. One of these drawings was of a then 16-year-old Eileen Ninetails, drawn in 2017. Now, Hyojin may have only been around 18 at the time, which is only 2 years, but that's still not an excuse to draw an NSFW of someone underage, especially if you're legally recognized as an adult. There's also the heavy use of racial slurs in many videos you can find archived online, most of which come from when she was around 18 to 20. Now, I do remember her since then apologizing for saying these slurs on stream, but it didn't really help her reputation. Remember when I talked about a YouTuber she was friends with called Slazo? Well, around June of 2019, the artist Vivziepop made a call-out post accusing Slazo of abuse and essay against her while they were dating, where she was backed up by Hyojin and many of her friends because they trusted her. Long story short, it turns out the bulk of these allegations were either highly exaggerated or completely false, and Vivziepop ended up deleting her account. It was later revealed that Hyojin, Vivziepop, and many of the other accusers started a group chat discussing how they could meticulously take down Slazo and ruin him. After all this was exposed and they all started to feel the heat and pressure from angry fans on both sides, Hyojin made a suicide attempt. Thankfully, it was a failure, and she was placed in a mental ward for some time after being released. After the incident and the heat died down, Hyojin did eventually apologize to Slazo, as she was IRL friends with Vivziepop and placed more trust into her than somebody she only knew online. A lot of people felt as though this was insincere, but as 2019 came to a close, Hyojin kept chugging along doing live streams, animating, and drawing. At this point, she had broken up with Pyrocynical and began dating another YouTuber named Punkduck. This would eventually lead to the complete destruction of her career, as on July 19th, 2022, Punkduck would make a statement on Twitter talking about his abuser, that abuser being Hyojin. He states that Hyojin had been abusive to him both mentally, emotionally, and physically. This lasted from when they were dating in 2019 to 2021. She would smash his head into a wall, threaten his life with a kitchen knife, and also confess to all of this in a Discord DM. Hyojin went silent for 2 weeks before making a public apology. At this point though, people were not having it, and were sick and tired of her constant controversies and not learning from her past. This was the final nail in the coffin for her, as she hasn't returned online ever since, leaving her YouTube channel to dip below 1 million subscribers. Let me tell you guys, when I said I was a fan, I mean I was a huge fan of hers, at least until 2021 where I stopped watching. At that point, I didn't know about or begrudgingly forgave her for some of the controversy she had because of my bias as a huge fan. Not this though. Reading those messages filled me with an unbridled amount of rage. Nobody deserves to go through what Punk Duck had to go through. And I really can't believe somebody would put up this facade of being a good person for so long. This entry is obviously very personal to me, but at the end of the day, you can't fully trust someone you're a fan of online. Be cautious and make sure to expose these people for who they truly are. MaxDesignPro is a children's animator from Belarus with over 10 million subscribers on YouTube. His claim to fame comes from a series involving a family of monkeys in funny and relatable human situations. Some of the named characters include Max, Hope, Jimmy, Evil Max, and Nugget. Yes, there is lore to these animations. Sometimes there's full animations dedicated to just lore as well. His channel was created in 2020, although it seems like a lot of his old videos were removed, as the oldest upload on his channel is from 2022. So far this seems pretty innocent, right? Well, yeah, for the most part it is. Although a lot of criticism comes along Max's way due to the very nature of slop content aimed at children. A lot of people, especially parents, are very concerned with YouTube Kids content and what exactly they're watching and learning. It's been a problem for a while, especially with the ElsaGate situation a few years back. The meta changes every few years to see who can grab the most attention the longest. Let's be honest here, MaxDesignPro's animations do fall into the category of brain rot slop, with wacky sound effects and all that every second to keep the 6-year-old iPad kid's attention before they move on to something else. Every short begs the viewer to click on the like button and subscribe, or else the nugget dies or something. I can see how people think it's a little predatory towards kids' attention. I gotta be honest though, I don't really think this is the worst thing a kid could be watching. Is it stupid and confusing? Yeah. But I'm a grown man. Of course I wouldn't understand what the kids are into nowadays. From what I've seen though, it's extremely tame and doesn't try to inject weird fetishes or sexualization into the videos, so that's a relief at least. What did surprise me though, is that Max has a huge fan base of teenagers and young adults who seem to unironically love this series meant for toddlers. There's hundreds of pieces of fan art, accounts dedicated to certain characters, layers of drama from within. It's absolute insanity. I don't know how or why it's a thing, but it's not my business, so I'm just gonna drop it. I think this actually might be one of the most tame things on the Iceberg, so good for him. ChippleDipple, otherwise known as Fractal County, is an artist, developer, and animator whose reputation has fallen into the gutter because of misinformation, trolling, and pissing off the wrong people. Chip's initial start came from animations he did on his YouTube channel, which went viral and propelled him into the limelight of internet fame. One of them was Carl the Brain Cell, made in 2018, which was an animated Oni Plays bit and where I initially found him. In November of 2019, Chip, Wilbur Soot, and Josh 820 would create SMP Earth, inspired by SMP Live created by Call Me Carson. SMP Earth would actually continue until April of 2020. Now, given the nature of Minecraft YouTuber fans, things got crazy really quickly. The mega fans, also known as stans, of YouTubers like Dream and George Not Found as examples, would be parasocially obsessed with these people and worship them almost as if they were gods. This isn't too dissimilar to crazy obsessed fans of celebrities like Taylor Swift and most K-pop groups. Because of his association with these YouTubers, all eyes were now on Chip, who is a co-founder. Long story short, Chip's posting habits on Twitter pissed off a lot of these stans. However, the posts in question were either really obvious jokes or mild trolling. He'd be bombarded with hate messages and death threats for anything he posted. However, Chip's attitude towards this was very different than most. The average person would stop posting what they wanted and succumb to the hate mob attacking them. Chip took a different approach, however. He doubled down and keep posting what he felt like. Sometimes it'd be comics about things he thought were annoying, sometimes mocking people for being dumb, or just making people mad on purpose because to him it was funny. Hey, remember John Bob from last video? Well, he also included Chip in some animations before the allegations, without permission of course, but it was good for growth so he let it slide, as did many other creators. About a year after the allegations hit, Chip would make a very obviously satirical fan cam of John Bob, which burned a lot of bridges with any major supporters he might have had. Not many people would want to associate with him after this, causing his circle to grow smaller. At this point, Chip was running out of allies to actually vouch or support him if something serious did happen. And something did actually happen. It turns out on multiple occasions, some anonymous accounts posed as Chip's fans and sent horrible images of gore and NSFW to people, pretending like they were sent by him to harass his detractors. The accounts mostly admitted to being neutral parties that wanted to cause chaos for fun, but a lot of people didn't believe this and thought Chip had sent them. The next incident would involve poop. Stay with me. Someone who talked to Chip would make a post calling him out for sending them images of his poop, claiming that he legitimately took a shit in his own hands and then took a picture. The image being of Chip's own poop and being taken by him were false, as it was connected to a now deleted account who actually did do that. However, yes, Chip did send a picture of poop, not his own poop mind you, to this person. What makes it worse is that this person was 17 going on 18 in a few weeks. Why did he do this? According to him, he thought the person was annoying and thought it was funny. I'm gonna be honest, probably not the best idea to send poop photos to people, especially when you don't know them that well, but f***ing what do I know? Now, while this in my eyes and many other people's eyes was a shitty, thing to do, others went as far as to call it a sex crime against a minor. Now we enter the Pipka arc of this segment, where Chip posted a meme including the artist Pipka, causing them to respond saying that they don't want anything to do with him. This would culminate into Chip and his fans making Pipka Gassy edits, alongside the character Incredible Gassy, and his own character Sergeant Braphog. Jesus f***ing Christ, what am I reading? There was also the Pipka game that Chip would create, which was a platformer involving their character becoming morbidly obese and fighting pre-diet Nikocado avocado. Pipka and Chip's beef would last for a while, where Chip would make fun of them, Pipka would always retaliate, Chip finds it funny, and repeat. This caused a vicious cycle of mockery with hundreds of tweets throughout a few months. The launch website for the Pipka game would go live in March of 2023. However, something was wrong. It turns out Chip fucked up and a lot of personal information, including his real name, address, and phone number, were found in the source code. Chip would then get doxxed and have dozens of people call his personal phone. Except not really. Turns out the whole thing was a huge stunt and totally fabricated. All the information was fake and the phone number was a burner recording all the messages sent. These would be placed into the game as voice lines, and the stunt was created to weed out all the people who celebrated or posted the doxing. After all this, Chip made a document debunking all the claims made against him, like the poop, stalking, harassment, and pedo allegations. Although most people who hated him didn't care, their minds were made up. In fact, not long after, Chip would get doxed for real this time. The doxer is going as far as to contact his family. Fearing for his own safety, he deactivated his account temporarily. Chip has been back for a while now, and from what I've seen, he hasn't got into any major drama since the Pipka arc. Although in September, there was that time he changed his name and profile picture to Smart Schoolboy 9 as a joke, which people didn't like. Funnily enough, because Twitter is Twitter, he couldn't change his profile picture back and was stuck as Smart Schoolboy 9 for a while. He's been working on developing some games for the most part and stayed out of major trouble since the actual doxing happened. He still posts what he feels like, but most have either blocked him or don't care anymore. Probably the best, since becoming public enemy number 1 on Twitter is always a bad idea, just like what happened to Stonetoss. Obviously, despite posting a lot of rage bait and making fun of people who may or may not have deserved it, I don't condone doxing and it definitely should not have happened. Most of the information was gathered from this Turkey Tom video, by the way, so if you want details and a more thorough analysis, then go watch that. At the very least though, when Chip saw the previous video I made, he at least understood how an iceberg chart worked, unlike the next guy we're going to be talking about. Anton Severtnik, otherwise known as Antoons, is an Estonian animator and comic artist with over 1 million subscribers on YouTube. Anton started his online career around 2014, but he's been drawing ever since he was a kid. Side note, by the way, his lore is actually really insane from what I'm reading. Dude was kidnapped by his dad when he was 3 and lived in West Ukraine, until his mom tracked him down with the police and took custody of him. There's a lot more about his childhood and past before YouTube you could have read on his blog made in 2015, although it seems like this was taken down, so use the Wikitubia page about him instead. To summarize, Anton was a bit of a huge loner in high school and middle school, struggling with grades and only finding solace in art and video games for a while. It's actually kind of sad to see how much he struggled in his youth. On YouTube, he's most well known for his Deathbed series that imagines cartoon characters hypothetically living out their last day, usually a metaphor for that franchise dying. The series has been going on since 2017 and is immensely popular, garnering hundreds of millions of views per video. The popularity of this series and many others would launch his career as a successful animator for most of the 2010s. However, in 2020, Daft Pina, everybody's favorite critic, made a video about Anton, calling him out for his tracing and some animations he did. The tracing was done without permission and mostly went uncredited. His response was that the tracing was okay because other people do it as well, according to him. Also arguing that what he did was transformative. adding his own style and flair over the traced frames of animation.
The example of what I used, the one that got most attention, was an image of a certain comic creator on the blue pilled side. I traced that as the base for the model in the mock-up trailer, but after that all the animation bits, like his attacks, were original. The only reason I traced one image was to make sure their representation looked recognizable, and once I got it down, I made the rest of the work from scratch.
Now, is tracing the end-all be-all for someone? Not really. It's pretty taboo in the art community, although it can be used as a learning tool for your own growth, as long as you're not claiming a traced image as your own work. Still, not a good thing to do in general, because it is stealing from others. Next, we move on to all the Twitter drama he had with his comics and Puppychan. Anton in 2020 would make highly offensive and edgy comics to get a rise out of people. He pretty much became a diet version of Stonetoss with jokes that aren't even original and lack any sort of punchline or comedy that Stonetoss has. Suffice to say, people did not like these comics and criticized him heavily for this. This leads into his beef with Puppychan, which lasted for a while. Long story short, Puppychan and Anton had a public argument about the concept of being transgender and about autism. This was a very long battle of tweets, DMs, comics, and harassment from fans on both sides, which culminated into Anton putting Puppychan's character into a game he was working on, where their special attack was spurting period blood from their crotch. Keep in mind, Puppychan was 17 at the time, which made this look incredibly bad for his side. And before anyone says anything, I will get to Puppychan and all the things they did later. This is just about Anton for now. After being confronted, Anton and Puppychan had a private talk in DMs and decided to squash the beef and let the drama finally end. Except not really. Leaked DMs on Discord show Anton claiming this was a non-aggressive act, where he would strike again once they were 18. Not to mention all the times he mentions using them for his own gain in The War with the Left. Jesus, I don't think I've seen a man more perpetually stuck in his 2016 anti-SJW phase than Anton. In late March of 2021, he would commission Butch Hartman to draw his character Mr. Freaks holding up a white flag that was burning. The version he publicly posted though showed the transgender flag, not a white one. It turns out Anton colored in the white flag with transgender colors to make it seem like Hartman drew something hateful as an April Fool's joke. Hartman already doesn't have a good reputation online and has done some shady things, but many agreed that slandering him like this, even for a joke, was going a little too far. In 2022, he would make a huge video cataloging all of the drama he'd gotten into over the years, and try to debunk the claims made by multiple commentary channels. Two of those channels being Just Stop and Harley TBS, where it should be noted that Anton drew them with their pants down getting spanked, both of whom were around 17. Yet again, not a good look. Even if his intentions were not sexual and more for comedic relief like he claims in the video.
As you can clearly see, the pants fall off in one shot, but they're back in the next one when spanking begins, which means Just Stop has clearly missed the point of the gag, or at least pretended that he missed it. A creepy type setup of a situation like this, but leads to good old-fashioned child discipline instead, doesn't mean anything sexual at all. Not to mention it's a cartoon avatar, with freaking 4 fingers instead of 5, and I'm honestly surprised that Just Stop lost his marbles when he saw it.
This thing is over 2 hours long, by the way, and goes into detail about everything that's happened since 2020. I've watched most of it, and I'll admit, there are a lot of good points he makes about his detractors and whatnot, but there's also a lot of really bad faith misinterpretations and illogical arguments that many people, including myself, don't agree with. I can't name them all and dissect this for time reasons, but there's a lot of people who have talked about it online. I'm also 90% sure he frantically searches up his name online almost every day because he found my video and said this on Twitter, even though, like I mentioned in the beginning, this is sorted from most known entries to lesser known ones. You're probably watching this right now, actually. Hi, Anton. Maybe you should spend more time focusing on your job and not getting into beef with teenagers on the internet as a 36-year-old man. James Bear, also known as Doodle Jam, was an animator and YouTuber well known for his short comedic animations, starring usually himself and his ex Clarissa. James created his account back in 2013, but it would take him a full year to upload his first few animations. Those animations being a heavily inspired series called Jam World, and by heavily inspired, I mean it's almost identical to Ed's World. Eventually, he'd move on to regular parodies and animations for YouTubers like Pyrocynical for a while. He wouldn't get his big break until around 2019 when the No Nut November trend was in full swing. Most of these starred Clarissa in very revealing clothing, which is probably the reason for the boost in fame. Noticing this, James decided to double down on sexualizing Clarissa in every animation, which propelled him into even higher amounts of fame. On the surface, everything seemed okay, but James would not be in this video if the story ended here. Aaron Preston is the author of a 182-page document called The Truth Behind James Bear, detailing messages that James had sent to him and a huge confession that he made. In February of 2016, James confessed to Aaron that in 2013, he essayed his own sister who was 9 years old at the time. What makes things worse is that he kept doing this to her for years, only stopping around 2016. James at the time was a teenager, so he very much knew what he was doing was deplorable, but it didn't stop him. He blames what he did on depression and tries to garner sympathy from Aaron, like he's the victim in this whole thing. I'm gonna be honest, besides this very important piece of information, the rest of the document is an absolute train wreck. It's filled with nonsensical ramblings and petty grievances that don't matter. Like, there's a section where he calls out James for his big hand and demon fetish. Unfortunately, because of how much bullshit there is in this document, it flew under the radar when it was published back in July of 2018. Someone actually sent this document to me when it was published back then, and I can't believe it took until 2022 for people to realize what he'd done. In March of 2022, the user LaloDoesArt exposed James and the document to a large audience of people, which got the ball rolling for more people to find out about what he did. James's earlier response was also found, which was made back in 2020. If you're wondering, it's complete horseshit. He lies and says it only happened once, which directly contradicts what he told Aaron in private. He also says it was okay because he was a minor at the time and it was consensual.
Whatever I said in the leaked messages was fabricated. And I knew that this person would leak these messages one day with bad intentions. However, as much as I don't want to talk about my past, what happened back then was an isolated issue. It only happened once when I was a minor. It was already dealt with. Those who are involved are fine and made amends. I am not a threat to anyone, and the other claims are not true. This situation is old news, and despite what you think about all of this, no one has any right to judge my past.
This was picked apart by dozens of commentary YouTubers and destroyed his reputation online. He would make several responses on Twitter and YouTube, all of them filled with lies, contradictions, downplaying the situation, acting as the victim, etc. Even he would realize how bad they all were and deleted most of them. In September of 2023, James's alleged sister would come forward with her side of the story. Not only did James lie about everything in his responses, but he also lied in his confession. It's even worse than what he described. She alleges that he essayed her from 2013 all the way up until 2020. That is 7 full years of abuse and assault against his little sister. The backlash would cause James to spiral out of control and lose his mind. Not helping was the fact that Clarissa had obviously dumped him by this point. In February of 2024, a post would be made calling out James for harassing his now ex Clarissa and many of her friends out of jealousy and spite because she broke up with him. In the Aaron Preston document, you can see that the way James communicates is very creepy, childish, and petty. Nothing has changed since then, as the messages James was sending to Clarissa and her friends were downright stalker-like and deranged. He'd make multiple accounts to harass her after getting blocked, try to reach her through her friends that were sick of his bullshit, and he'd make up scenarios in his head to accuse people of in DMs. Those made up scenarios being that Clarissa was cheating on him with almost everyone she was friends with, and that she abused him. You can see this in many drawings he made where he depicts Clarissa as a cheating, emotionally abusive, and terrible person, while he's a caring, loving boyfriend that gets stomped on for no reason. These images are genuinely psychotic, by the way. This is followed by an account he definitely made that pretended to be Clarissa and talked about how much she loved cheating on James, exposing DMs between Clarissa and another person. His mind has been so rotted by porn that he constantly refers to himself as getting NTR'd, making dozens of posts like this. This is not the only account, by the way. There's another one that frantically tries to defend James. Another response would be made on July 8th of 2024, this time featuring his sister. Let me tell you, this one is really distressing. His sister sounds like she's being held at gunpoint to read a pre-made script defending James and saying she lied about everything for money.
This is Alicia speaking, or in other words, this is his sister speaking, and what my brother James is saying is true. First, I would like to give my deepest apology to everyone for spreading misinformation about my brother and about my own family. Truth be told, that I only came forward because I was only upset and my reasons for being upset were petty and I had a falling out with a friend. People who claimed they had their best interests never really cared, which resulted in me giving them very personal information and having the police come over to our family's house yet again. My actions were completely reckless and I didn't mean to put my family in danger like that. For years, I was always aware about the drama online towards my brother, and admittedly, I knew from the beginning that he was innocent, and unfortunately, I adopted this false history that the internet made about us, and it felt like I had more to gain by simply accepting it.
Pretty much everyone doubts this was genuine, as it makes no sense for her to go back on all the accusations unless James was threatening her, which it sounds like he is. Allegedly, James's family relies on the ad revenue from his channel for income. So it's likely that her whole family was complicit in the abuse and silenced her story for James's YouTube career. On July 18th, James would make another response on Twitter with a massive thread trying to debunk everything. It starts off by disproving the claims of using an AI-generated clone of his sister's voice, and her allegedly using donation funds to get a new PC. However, now he's claiming that the assault never even happened in the first place, and downplays it as awkward cuddling. He ends the thread saying he's moving on and wants to leave behind this drama, never being heard from since. This guy is genuinely one of the most deplorable and disgusting YouTubers I've ever had the displeasure of enjoying at one point in my life. I'm honestly surprised most people don't know about him or what he did because this is genuinely awful. I hope his sister can one day leave this horrible family and find peace. There's many more details and incidents that you can find in this video made by the YouTuber Salty. Shmorky, also known as Dave Kelly, was a prominent animator for the Something Awful forums and frequent collaborator with major networks like Adult Swim. Dave's early life was pretty awful. After graduating college in 2000, they struggled to find work as an animator and were abused by the people they had to live with for years. They did commission work for a while and made some short comedic animations for the website somethingawful.com. In 2004, a convention for Something Awful users would be created called GoonCon 2004. The past was truly a different time. The owner of the site, Richard Lotex Kianka, would finally get to meet Dave, being a huge fan of their work. This is where Dave would be given the opportunity to work for Something Awful as a full-time animator, and they soon became close friends. In 2008, Dave would create a Smurfs knockoff called Clurfs, which would represent themselves and be a staple in their comics and work for a long time. Unfortunately, Something Awful wasn't doing great for relevancy online, as YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter were kicking ass in numbers and growth. Around 2013 is where Richard and Dave decided to create a YouTube channel called Gaming Garbage, similar to the premise of AVGN. Things went well for a while actually. While the YouTube channel was doing okay in numbers, Dave was getting commissioned by networks like Adult Swim and allegedly even Nickelodeon at some point. Yes, they're the animator behind this bumper you might have seen floating around, as well as many others. 2016 is where things would ultimately crash and burn for Dave, as within the span of a few months, there would be dozens of controversies coming their way. First and foremost, Dave was revealed to be an abuser and overall shitty partner to their girlfriend Amanda. Amanda was diagnosed with schizoaffective and bipolar disorder, in which she would need medication to function properly. In a 9-minute video you can find on YouTube, Dave secretly records audio of Amanda freaking out, yelling, screaming, ranting, and crying.
I'll just do what you want. What do you want me to do? I'll do whatever you want. What do you want from me? Stop screaming and pretending. I'm not pretending! What do you want from me? What? What do you want from me?
With that in context, it turns out Dave hid her medication and forced her to stop taking them, essentially coaxing her into a mental breakdown that they recorded and posted online for sympathy. If you're wondering why Dave sounds like that, by the way, it's because they started really getting into gender identity and wanted a more androgynous presenting character. This includes a wig, makeup, and strange nasally voice they're putting on. I don't think this really matters in the grand scheme of things, I just want to explain why they look and sound different. Around this time, they were also kicked off of Gaming Garbage after a falling out with Richard, also being banned from Something Awful for that recording that they posted. After breaking up some time later, Amanda would provide the website Kiwi Farms with a lot of information regarding Dave's private life. Dave, to the surprise of nobody, was into urine, scat, and diapers. Rumors about this had circulated for years now, but this was the confirmation. Even revealing that they wanted Amanda to change their full diaper while being spoken to like a baby, on top of being confirmed to be a manipulator, abuser, and awful person in general. Worst of all though, a user named Carefully would reveal dozens of pages of chat logs between them and Dave from 2014. These chat logs were incredibly sexual RP that included incest, scat, urine, diapers, and anything else you can imagine. Thankfully, it seems like Carefully was over 18 during these messages, but my god, some of these are really hard to read. Especially since Dave loves pretending to be a child during most of the RP. Another person then joined in on this called Soliloqueef. They revealed that Dave tried to hire them as a voice actor in 2007, but the lines that Dave wanted them to read involved pretending to be an underage girl who was really into scat, urine, and diapers. Now you might be asking what these line reads were for. Well, this part gets crazy. Soliloqueef's lines were meant to be used on an account called Peaches the Puppy on Fur Affinity. Not only that, but it turns out the Peaches the Puppy account was also connected to another one called Sandy Pants, who seemed to be an underage girl coincidentally also into scat, urine, and diapers. He was pretending to be an underage girl who was into these fetishes on 2 separate accounts, going as far as to hire voice actors to play into this weird roleplay fantasy. After the uproar this caused on Kiwi Farms, Dave left one final comment on their Tumblr, checked into a loony bin, and hasn't been heard from in over 7 years. Since then, many have theorized that Dave went under a new name, that name being Stonetoss. Obviously not true with the recent information, but a fun theory for the time. Since then, Amanda seems to be doing okay and looks back on this era with amusement, although sadly, Richard Lotex Kianka would commit suicide on November 9th, 2021. A sad ending to an already tragic story. Most of the information I learned came from this video by Magic Mush, by the way. Watch it for more details. So that's the story as many people know it. However, as I did further research, I found a Tumblr blog claiming to debunk some major allegations against Dave. I'm gonna read some of the excerpts and summarize the main points. To recap what's going on one more time, sometime shortly before the New Year's, it was claimed that Shmorky supposedly had been having sexual chats with a 16-year-old on Skype, who came forward under the username Carefully on Kiwi Farms. These interactions involved diaper scat roleplay, and shortly after these claims were made, Shmorky attempted suicide. On January 2nd, Carefully released Skype logs on Kiwi Farms, and Shmorky's ex-fiancée Amanda also began to make accusations against him, ranging from his psychological abuse of her to him having alternate personas online. He attempted suicide again on the 6th. The main accusation is that Shmorky was involved in leaked sexual roleplay with a minor. This has already been denied by Carefully herself. The problem is, she waited over a week and a half before making this clear, long after the story had made its way around, and most people were already under the impression that she was 16 at the time when she added him on Skype. She was not. Amanda said a lot of things, going from saying Shmorky's room is covered in piss-soaked diapers, to claiming his boss Lotax rapes his own kids. If I were to go through every single contradiction she's made, this post would be even more stupidly long than it already is. So we'll focus on the more serious ones. Amanda claims that Shmorky prevented her from taking the medication she needed to cope with her schizophrenia. Lotax has already backed her up on this, saying that Shmorky for whatever reason was anti-medicine and anti-therapy. It's apparent from the logs that Amanda wasn't as unstable in the past as she is now, and the fact that he would repeatedly turn the cops away from dealing with her is an obvious sign of an abusive relationship. From the Skype conversations that she leaked herself, it's very clear that Shmorky was not in the slightest anti-medicine or anti-therapy. It's also pretty well known that Amanda was paranoid about continuing to take her medication on her own. This is me now cutting in, by the way. I gotta be honest, just because Dave says they're not anti-medication or anti-therapy in some Skype chat logs, it doesn't necessarily mean it's definitive proof that they're innocent in this case. It's very easy to just say one thing and not actually mean it with your actions. However, it is also totally possible that Amanda misplaced the medication or something, and believed that Dave hid them from her in a state of paranoia and delusion. It's been made clear that she makes a lot of baseless and insane accusations sometimes because of her condition. So in general, I guess I'd say take this one with a grain of salt. The third claim is that according to Amanda, Shmorky has 2 alternate personas, Sandy Pants and Peaches the Puppy. Another user on Kiwi Farms with the username Soliloqueef claims to have proof that Shmorky asked her to do voice work for Peaches the Puppy back in 2007, so that he could post it on the Peaches the Puppy for Affinity, thus disguising himself with a more feminine voice. This one is kind of weird, but it's still something Lotax seems to agree with. A mod on Kiwi Farms who knew a friend of Sandy Pants attempted to contact them, and their friend's testimony cast doubt on the idea of Shmorky being her. There's also the fact that Sandy Pants posted a statement on her Ink Bunny sometime around the 10th of January, at a point where Shmorky was still being held for a second attempted suicide 4 days earlier, and would have had to have known about these allegations being made against him on some random Kiwi Farms forum. That's also assuming that while he was being held, he had access to unmonitored internet in the first place. So Shmorky and some other adults had diaper RP. Then the other person leaked the Skype log and acted like she was underage at the time. She waited a week before she said she wasn't. Some more comments on her Skype also implied that she might have been dishonest as to how old she was in the past. Shmorky's ex-fiancé says that Shmorky was an aggressive abuser, but then releases chat logs that completely contradict a majority of her claims. Also, some stuff about Sandy Pants happened that doesn't really have much relevance, other than that it would possibly point to foul play on Amanda and Carefully's parts. That's about it. This definitely gives me a new perspective on this whole situation, and I'm really surprised a lot of people don't talk about it. From what I'm seeing, there's a good amount of proof towards Dave's innocence, but like I said, some of this evidence is very circumstantial and shaky. I'm not entirely sure how to feel about this, given that the damage is done and this whole thing is very old. James William Barkley III, also known as Animated James, was an artist, animator, voice actor, and musician, mostly known for his parodies and original series he created on his YouTube channel. James got his start on Newgrounds in 2008, most of his animations involving Sonic and then eventually MLP, because of course they did. Almost every animator and artist around this time seemed to really be into either Sonic, MLP, or both. These videos were honestly very impressive and well animated for a teenager. James had an immense amount of talent when it came to almost anything creative. That showed in his numbers. These videos got tons of views, which made him start a YouTube channel in 2011. During this era, we saw huge projects like Seniors and C Students, which were some of my favorite animations by him. Although, there was a certain incident in 2014, which caused a lot of mental health problems for him and was most likely the catalyst for what happens next. In May of 2014, someone on 4chan linked a Tumblr page called Sonic Girls, which contained webcomics of girls from the Sonic series, farting and defecating, sometimes on each other. Immediately, somebody clocked this art style as being very similar to Animated James. When confronted, he vehemently denied the allegations. And then mysteriously, the Tumblr page was deleted right after. From this very poor move, there was no denying it. Animated James had a fart fetish. This caused great bouts of depression as he was mocked and made fun of all over the internet for this. Even Zach Khyle of Psychic Pebbles fame and Spaz Kid got in a Skype call with him, only to make fart noises and ask if it turned him on. Because of this incident, James would have massive trust issues, and became very standoffish. The mockery he received for this really affected him, and it caused a huge shift in who he was as a person. Now, like I said in the first video, I think having fetishes like this is fine, as long as you're not hurting anyone. And as funny and embarrassing as this might have been, I think he deserves to be called out for more of the serious allegations against him, which I'm going to talk about now. Also in 2014, he began dating an artist named Toxic Soul 77 online, also known as Michaela Groves. The problem being, James was around 20, while Michaela was only 17. Many accused him of grooming and which was amplified even more when James tried to justify it by quoting the age of consent laws in New York where he lived. They would eventually break up near the end of 2015 because of the accusations against him. Funnily enough, James Bear, who I talked about earlier, tried going after Michaela after this happened, obviously getting rejected. Thank God. Despite this, his fame got him invited to several conventions in the mid-2010s, most of which being MLP related. Although his behavior at BronyCon 2015 would cause some controversy and scrutiny under his name. James, for some reason, decided to heckle other guest speakers at a panel because to him they weren't funny enough.
To leave a panel hosted by someone who I consider to be a close friend. So what I do is I yell out, "We're not friends anymore," and then I walk out.
And also made SA jokes directly to the face of an acquaintance, ripping on their artwork as well. When this person got mad at them and called him out on Twitter, James at first went, "Heh, ever heard of a thing called dark humor, libtard? Before making a proper apology. Those guest speakers would later call him out for the heckling, causing even more controversy. After some time, James made a video calling out the brony community for being easily butthurt and not being able to take jokes or criticism. Hearing the news about James's behavior, BronyCon banned him from speaking at any more events. While he wasn't banned from outright attending, this did cause a rift between the brony community and himself, now having a reputation for being a huge dick. Going into the second half of the 2010s, James's mental health would continue to spiral. He publicly revealed that at this time he was going through severe depression and social anxiety, which greatly affected his motivation to do YouTube. That's when he dropped arguably the greatest animation he's ever made, and my personal favorite, Creative Types. Despite what he did, I really love this animation. The song is amazing, everything is so polished and nice looking, the storyline is great, I just think it's his best work. His audience and even the people who mocked him agreed. It garnered universal praise and got him back into the swing of things on YouTube. Although, after a few more animations, this wouldn't last long. On July 16th, 2018, James would release his final video, which announced the discontinuing of the channel and quitting the internet to focus on his mental health. He reasoned that making videos and focusing on animation gave him no time to fix his problems on the inside, causing a lot of drama which I mentioned before. James then left the internet with no trace. About a year later, on August 19th, 2019, the voice actress for Penny from C Students made a statement. She had left C Students because James had wanted her to do a lot of sexually explicit material that she wasn't comfortable with for the show. Not only that, but James actively pursued her romantically and even offered to fly out to where she lived. She was also 17, and James, according to the timeline, was already dating Michaela. So that's two minors he was lusting over at the same time. When she left the show, James became so angry that he allegedly encouraged his fanbase to harass her. 4 years later, James would actually return after going silent. He acknowledges that he deserved all the criticism that went his way back then, especially him dating a 17-year-old at 20. All the burned bridges, ruined relationships, bad behavior, and being mocked were all his fault according to him. In a Daft Pina interview later that year, he revealed that he went homeless in 2020, making it his lowest point both physically and mentally.
I became homeless right around the start of the COVID pandemic when everyone is supposed to be in their homes as much as possible. So that sort of gave me this perspective of, I guess this is how I go. Like, I guess this is just it. While I did have sort of a dismal outlook in that regard, being homeless definitely helped me put my priorities in order. And like, despite it being the most difficult external time in my life, internally, I was a lot more at peace. I was a lot more just accepting of who I am, who I was, and just everything about me. So while it was difficult, I don't think it was anything that I don't deserve. I definitely believe that I got everything I had coming to me in that regard.
Thankfully, he managed to recover because of the people around him, planning on going to therapy and taking medication. Surprisingly, he's still active under a new name, drawing NSFW commissions and doing what he feels like. He says he's not asking for forgiveness and understands if people still hate him. He just wants to move past his old persona and move on to doing what he wants. Despite this, there is a conspiracy theory surrounding an account named Neurotic. This channel popped up right after James retired, and one of these videos has a very distinct animated James style. Their final tweet also makes it seem like James was trying to make animations under a new name, before deciding it wasn't a good idea. It's still unconfirmed if this was really James or not, but a lot of people seem to think it is. You know, as much as I loved James's content back then and want to forgive him for his past grievances, him dating and lusting after 2 minors is where I draw the line. I do hope he's going to be alright mentally, but I cannot support him at all in good faith. Yet again, more details can be found in this Turkey Tom video. Danny, also known as Lord Bung, was an animator and artist who created an immensely popular original series on YouTube based on the SCP Foundation. If you don't know what the SCP Foundation is, it's a fictional wiki-based collaborative writing project where people write entries and stories about things like anomalies, entities, and objects. It's very popular online, and even inspired some books and video games. Around 2016 is where Danny would start their online career with a series called Bung Chronicles. These were actually more akin to animated rant/commentary videos, discussing topics like vaccines, crystals, and astrology in the form of debunking. It's actually extremely impressive how long and well written these videos are, feeling like a network-produced TV show instead of one person creating it. Danny had already showed the internet that they had a lot of talent to create high-quality productions, and that showed in their next series called Confinement in 2017. Confinement was an SCP-based black comedy about Connor, who was locked in the Foundation under D-Class and used for human experiments, given that he had the power of instantly coming back to life after dying. This series was massive, garnering millions of views per episode, and receiving unanimous praise from not only the SCP community, but also the general public. It was so good that people who had never even heard of SCP stuff actually checked it out after watching, including me. Sadly, because of copyrighted music, Danny couldn't keep any of the ad revenue made from these early episodes, a lot of it going to record labels instead, because God knows they need the money. Despite the financial hurdle, Danny managed to make 4 episodes within a short time frame of a few months. Around this time is when the Confinement Patreon was getting traction too, which made sense given how long animation takes and how many people were willing to pay good money to fund this series. Things did eventually start to slow down, but the animation was getting much better and more elaborate, justifying the extra time between episodes. The last full and finished Confinement episode was released in 2019. Arguably the peak of their career, with the Patreon allegedly in the thousands. Although tragedy seemed to strike when Danny fell down the stairs and broke their tailbone. This meant that working on the series would take a backseat so they could eventually get better and be able to sit down without pain. This is important later on, I swear. Behind the scenes, they collaborated with and made a ton of friends online, who even have some cameos in videos. I actually mentioned their entire friend group in the last video with Squizxy, but this time we're going to talk about Quite. So Danny had hired people at this point to work on the show to get it out faster, which is great news. Although around 2021 is when they would start dating a co-writer named Orion. Usually dating your coworkers doesn't end well, and it certainly didn't for Danny. On February 22nd of 2023, Orion made a twitlonger calling out the YouTuber Quite for many things, one of the most serious being essay and abuse. In the weeks following the call-out post, Danny would write on Instagram that they fully trusted Orion and what they were saying about Quite was 100% true. Quite later made a response, and it turns out Orion had falsely accused Quite of this serious crime. for some reason. I don't remember if a motive ever came to light, but from what I've seen, it looks like they were still bitter after a falling out they had in 2018. But yes, Quite had receipts and managed to debunk these allegations in a video you can find on their channel. Just like Vivziepop and the Slazo accusations, Orion deactivated their account shortly after and vanished from the internet. The heat was now on Danny, who publicly was in support of someone who falsely accused another of SA. Well, it was silent for a while until June, where Danny made the decision to stop the Patreon outright and delete their presence on the internet, which included their 1 million subscriber YouTube channel. This sadly meant the discontinuing of Confinement as a series. Wait, hold on. The Patreon content got leaked. Holy shit, it's episode 8. Let's watch, everybody. That's it? That's the lost episode? That was just a bunch of cheap sex scenes!
What a rip!
Lord Bung betrayed us! Yup, most of what was being worked on for episode 8 was this weird, almost fetish-like softcore porn of Connor being naked and accidentally slipping around while having sex with people. That's all there was since the last full episode in 2019. There has to be a name for this kink because it's animated in a very specific way that's meant to probably get themselves off. In fact, many have pointed out that the sex scenes seem to be animated by Orion themselves. This only added fuel to the fire as Danny was seen as not only in support of a deceiver, but also a scammer. Again, nothing wrong with having weird kinks and fetishes, but using Patreon money for this instead of doing your damn job is pretty scummy. And just as they promised, Lord Bung was erased from the internet and only exists in archives you can find online. This is where the injury comes in. You see, many people believe in a certain timeline of unfortunate events happening, leading to the downfall of their career. When Danny broke their tailbone in 2019, they began using Patreon funds to buy weed and other sedatives to ease the pain. Danny made this a habit, even after their tailbone should have healed, which is approximately 8 to 12 weeks. Orion later came into the picture and began writing, in which they would shoehorn in their self-insert OC, who would of course fall in love with Connor and they'd get together, tanking the writing in the process. Orion would then manipulate and lie to Danny about the Quite allegations, and given that they were dating, Danny would blindly take their side. Can't really fault them for trusting their partner initially, to be fair, but it's still unfortunate. Orion and Danny would around for a few years, smoking weed and animating this, while nothing worthwhile was actually being produced, until it all came crashing down. Danny has not been seen since this incident, Confinement fans are still angry, and most of this was cataloged by Mr. Sumerian, so thank you to him. Actually, as I was researching, I stumbled upon another conspiracy similar to Animated James. There's an NSFW account on Twitter called SamRockwell420 that just so happens to share a very similar art style to Orion's. In fact, there's a thread on Reddit with multiple people who are extremely confident that this account is Orion. You can take a look for yourself, but be mindful nothing is confirmed. Also, this goes without saying, but do not harass this person. Even if they do end up being Orion, they don't deserve this, and I don't want to be responsible for anything that could happen. Tom Preston, aka Andrew Dobson, was a webcomic artist mainly known for the series So, You're a Cartoonist, among many other controversies and incidents that he's had in the past 15 years. Tom from an early age seemed to always have a huge interest in Nintendo and drawing cartoons, so much so that he was bullied for it, which apparently was so awful that he deliberately chose to go to college in Minnesota of all places to get away from his bully. You can see how people can really get under Tom's skin with a little teasing, because he held a grudge against his high school bully for 7 years. Although bullying is a bit of a strong word to use in this context, because from what he describes, this bully just made fun of him here and there and mocked him back in high school. That's it. Obviously, I don't condone bullying, but it seems like a huge overreaction to move across state lines just to get away from one guy who made fun of you as a teenager. And from the post that Tom made, it looks like the guy wanted to add Tom on MySpace to maybe make amends and apologize for ragging on him back then. But according to Tom, it fills me with such anger that he of all people, would think that everything he did to me was moot, and he would try to make up with me. Tom attended the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, in which he would yet again get made fun of by people because he wore a fedora every day to class to hide his balding head. Surprisingly, he didn't flee the country because of this, and went on to graduate with a bachelor's in fine arts. although he ended up learning nothing from those 4 years because of his inflated ego and inability to take criticism. This shows in his stagnant art style, which hasn't improved since he created his DeviantArt in 2004. Reminds me of someone. Tim Buckley. For his early days on the internet, he'd make a living by drawing inflation porn, going under the pseudonym Caddy N, hosting all the inflation-related work on his own website, which included inflation flash games. Yes, this is real. Eventually, he'd get bored of drawing fetish content and move on to posting random artworks here and there throughout the mid to late 2000s. This brings us to 2009, where Tom made a webcomic, as mentioned before, most of which involves strawman arguments. If you want your opinion to look good, make sure to depict the person who doesn't agree with you as moronic, jealous, angry, gross, and an unlikable caricature. That way, people can see you as the stoic and reasonable genius that you truly are. Tom did this a lot, especially when glazing Nintendo, which he did often. When people rightfully criticize these comics for their flawed arguments and lack of, well, being good, Tom decided to go on paragraphs-long rants about how he doesn't need to change, and any critique against him is stupid and nobody cares. He's also a massive hypocrite. You see, Tom is very inspired by and loves 90s anime, which is presumably what he grew up on and based his art style off of. Keyword though, 90s anime. For a really bizarre reason, he also hates anime, more specifically anime from the 2000s and onwards. Now in 2002, a movie called Treasure Planet was released by Disney, and unfortunately it bombed really hard at the box office, costing many people their jobs. This pushed Disney to use more 3D animation, which was much more successful. And now you know why you've never seen anything 2D animated in theaters ever again. Tom's dream was to work at Disney, and he'd spent a lot of time getting his degree so he could become a 2D animator. But now those dreams were gone. What does this have to do with anime? Well, Tom got the idea in his head that Treasure Planet was inspired by anime of the time, and that's why it bombed so hard. So essentially, he blames 2000s anime, which he thinks inspired Treasure Planet, which lost Disney so much money, it cost him his non-existent career. There are many other controversies to list. His fetishization of lesbians, calling people horrible things for disagreeing with them, sending this image to the daughter of Robin Williams right when he passed away, the water bottle incident, etc. But I want to talk about arguably his most famous and funniest controversy that he had in the mid-2010s. This is the Power Girl comic. It features a creepy guy taking photos of a cosplayer without her permission, until Tom heroically saves the day by beating the creep with a baseball bat. The only problem is, none of this actually happened. You see, it turns out the guy doing the photography was the cosplayer's boyfriend, and judging by the photos, she seems very okay with it. Tom can be seen in the background with his iconic fedora, fantasizing about saving this woman from nothing, which inspired this make-believe comic. Tom would continue the same old shtick of arguing with people online and sending death threats to politicians, until eventually he wiped his internet presence mysteriously in 2020. Allegedly, the reason for this was because of his family forcing him to stop using the internet. Tom's brother was in line to receive a very prestigious and important government job, until Tom ruined it because of his online behavior, and the mere association with Tom made his brother lose that opportunity. Again, this is all alleged because it's very hard to verify this claim online. Tom hasn't returned to the internet since, and it's doubtful that he ever will. I also want to thank Magic Mush yet again for the video on this topic, in which I gathered most of my information from.
Hey, paisano!
Oh my god, Mario, Luigi, Princess, Toad!
Who did you expect? Foxbox Ray?
Steve Cutts is a British animator whose work focuses on satirization of modern culture and society. Most of his major projects involve activism in one way, shape, or form. This ranges from things like environmentalism, corruption, greed, and the topic I'm going to focus on, smartphone addiction. In October of 2016, the band Moby hired Steve to make an animated music video for their song, Are You Lost in the World Like Me?, after seeing his previous work Man in 2012. The music video is, pretty bad on all counts. I guess the message behind it is okay, but it's presented in such a dumb and pretentious way, it's hard to take seriously. The animation is trying to go for that 1930s Fleischer style, yet none of this era's techniques or movements is present in this video. You know who did do a good job at recreating this style authentically and making it look good? Studio MDHR when they made Cuphead. They knew what they were doing, unlike this. I love the part where this guy just randomly kicks a puppy for no reason. Like, why did he do that? There's also this really weird section about a minute in, where he sees a woman getting harassed on the subway, but he chooses to do nothing about it solely because he won't get praise from everyone else. You know why? Because they're all staring at their cell phones. Man, I hate that people addicted to their smartphones prevents me from helping people for no ulterior motives. and God forbid a person wanting to be with someone they find attractive. You know when your parents or grandparents would always say things like, kids these days are all addicted to their smartphones and don't go outside. Well, imagine that phrase but turned into an animation and you get this. Whoa man, this is really fucking deep. Did you know that they call them cell phones because we're all prisoners to them? Society is so fucking messed up, man. Why can't everybody just read books? They're so much better because, well, they just are, okay? Puppychan, also known as Autumn, was an online artist known mostly for their drawings of anthropomorphic animals and suggestive furry characters which were immensely popular in the late 2010s. Autumn joined Twitter at the ripe age of 13 in 2016, already doomed from the start. Like many other artists on this list, they were bullied as a child and took refuge and support from strangers on the internet, who would validate Autumn by supporting their art career. The drawings posted were actually really well made for their age. It was something unique and polished, not seen much online, gaining them a massive fanbase who wanted even more. Their art actually becomes a point of contention later on in this segment, which I'll eventually get to. The bigger fanbase unfortunately meant more addiction to the validation that they were receiving, with many tweets fishing for attention and wanting compliments. Similar to Fallen Chungus in the last video I made, Autumn was very clearly addicted to Twitter, which would escalate as their mother, who is a Jehovah's Witness, tried to get them off the internet. This didn't work obviously, and Autumn began to really overshare about everything going on in their life, even personal mental health struggles such as age regression and suicidal thoughts, which they would use as a shield or even as ammunition later on. Not to mention their art style progressively getting more suggestive over time. Bigger boobs, bigger thighs, and a slim waist to attract all the gooners. They did this for every character in OC they drew, which was not a good thing because their fanbase was composed of a lot of minors who were being exposed to this. This escalation continued as they made a private account discussing their kinks and fetishes. In June of 2020, an anonymous Twitter account was created to call out Autumn for the suggestive artworks being exposed to minors, among other things. Autumn called for the mass reporting of that account, and then made a tweet threatening to commit suicide over it. Autumn would get into an argument with the accuser in private DMs, and then unironically use the "I'm mentally ill and a minor" excuse for any form of criticism with how they handle their platform. After this incident happened, Antoons would step into the picture, but I've already talked about that, so I'm not going to go over it. Once they turned 18 in 2020, they went full NSFW on a separate pre-existing account, and flipped to hating minors and wanting nothing to do with them. Although Autumn made zero effort to actually discourage minors from following them, or taking precautions to brand themselves as someone who is adult only. This stuff is really important because of laws and social compliance when it comes to minors following suggestive/NSFW accounts. Autumn made an apology for doing this after getting called out, but then made another post about suicide and then deactivated. Autumn came back later and tried to rebrand to no avail. Making things worse was that their girlfriend Hazel was caught pressuring minors into their polycule, in which the whole thing just collapsed. Autumn made another suicide attempt trying to overdose on pills, yet thankfully they were saved by paramedics and hospitalized. Soon they'd be placed into a psych ward and then returned in early 2021. Despite everything that happened, Autumn continued to grow their fanbase, which was really not good for their mental health. In a thread on Autumn's private account, they would go into detail about how they were a martyr and that angels and demons were real and possessing them. They would also reveal their struggles with food, which turned out to be diabetes. Things would continue as usual, where they would make inflammatory statements, not take any criticism, and use their mental health as a shield from rightfully getting called out. However, in November of 2021, Autumn would make their biggest hit, which was Gothfield, a goth femme version of Garfield. This blew up almost instantly, and many other artists were inspired to draw the character in their own way. This got so big in fact that people eventually forgot about the origins of Gothfield, and Autumn stopped getting credit for it. This made them very angry, as they sent their fans to tell artists drawing the character to credit Autumn. They'd also go on their private account and rant about how bigger artists were assholes for ignoring them, which just kinda reeks of entitlement and jealousy. Yet again, as the months went on, it was more suicidal tweets, more fights with random people, and more terrible suggestive art. This would spiral into manic tweets on their private accounts about God, the Antichrist, and threatening to commit suicide via ingesting blueberries, which apparently they were allergic to. Obviously, this didn't work, and they began overdosing on pills again, which also didn't work. Autumn blamed this on their other personalities, alluding to having DIT. But at this point, people were sick of their behavior, which hadn't changed for years. Autumn then decided to go full NSFW on their main account, and posted very lewd images of their characters, which were interacted with by a lot of minors. Speaking of minors, Autumn confessed on their private account that they were interacting with a minor that was getting really suggestive and lewd with them. The minor had been called out before for drawing NSFW at the age of 15 and was asking Autumn to retweet their stuff. Despite saying that they were going to stop interacting with them, Autumn lied and kept doing it, even retweeting and interacting with their NSFW work. This was the final straw, as a vast majority of people called him out for grooming. Even their diehard fans were not okay with what happened. DMs would also leak of Autumn even encouraging the minor to post NSFW on a private account, instead of doing the responsible thing and telling them to stop drawing it altogether. The backlash was so strong that Autumn deactivated their account for good. Until all of a sudden, this account called Kung Fu Revy popped up. This account was presumably run by an Asian person who didn't speak a lot of English. Except it wasn't. It was Autumn yet again trying to rebrand. Now they were being called a racist after getting exposed, and ranted about it on their private accounts before disappearing for a while. Autumn actually didn't leave the internet for good. In a video about art degradation made by Daft Pina, Autumn, now going by Salem, comments on it and reflects on their past as Puppychan. They're still around and post on Tumblr as WolfTinger666. From what I've seen, they seem to be doing good, and their art has improved drastically since the Puppychan Gooterbait days. Once again, if you want more details, check out the video by Turkey Tom. If you were a successful artist online, ranging from the early to late 2010s, especially on sites like Tumblr and DeviantArt, you've probably heard the legend of the Wonder Bread guy. He was a mysterious, anonymous, and surprisingly wealthy commissioner who would spend thousands upon thousands of dollars commissioning very specific drawings from different artists. The drawings were of evil, blonde, and wealthy businesswomen at grocery stores, buying dozens of loaves of white Wonder Bread. If you haven't clocked it already, this is definitely a fetish. The person who was commissioning all these pieces went by the username Merlogic1 on DeviantArt and other sites. However, there's also a lesser known type of artwork he likes to commission. Sometimes, he prefers evil, blonde, and wealthy businesswomen tearing down forests and building sandwich factories, in a cartoonishly nefarious sort of way. Even Shadman was contacted by this guy in 2018 to do a commission, except for some reason, this was something Shad refused to draw. Yes, the same Shadman who drew CP and other horrible things, refused to do some tame fetish art that arguably isn't even that sexual. And this should be noted, according to him in the interview with the YouTuber Scumbagovich, he claims to have been completely unaware about all the horrible things Shadman had done or his reputation.
Before I even got to that point, you know, I'm just a little young mer going around asking people for different commissions. I don't do background checks on any of the characters that I, ask for commissions because,
So let me stop you right there. One quick thing. I'm just curious how that's the case because Shadman is the type of guy where his reputation absolutely precedes him, and I would find it very difficult to approach him for art, not knowing anything about him, you know?
Look, I know it sounds unbelievable, but I truly do believe that I am the commission equivalent of Forrest Gump, where I just run into people and I just ask them stuff, and then one thing leads to another.
It's up to you guys if you want to believe him, but for the sake of time, let's move on. So what caused this fetish? According to the interview, it all started with Season 2, Episode 30B of Dexter's Lab, called The Old Switcheroos, where Dexter and Dee Dee are punished by staying in opposite rooms. The sequence of Dexter's paranoia about Dee Dee breaking and destroying all his stuff really, impacted him, so to speak. And the concept of an evil blonde woman destroying forests and being cartoonishly evil came from Dr. Blight of Captain Planet. According to someone on 4chan who had a similar fetish, it's a power dynamic and corruption thing, which is honestly very common. Generally, a lot of people are into a cruel and dominating woman, although not to the degree of specificity that Merlogic's into. But how about the Wonder Bread? Again, according to the guy on 4chan with the same fetish, it's the idea of the woman destroying and polluting her body by eating copious amounts of processed foods. One of those foods being plain white Wonder Bread. Merlogic is actually still active on Twitter and other sites, often openly discussing this fetish and what cartoon characters check all the boxes. Make sure to go check out the video by Scumbagovich for more details, and an interview with Merlogic himself. On January 20th, 2015, America was given one of the most influential and popular musicals of recent memory, made by disgraced Puerto Rican and soprano star Lin-Manuel Miranda. That musical being Hamilton, about Alexander Hamilton and the founding of the United States, sung entirely with the influence of rap and hip-hop. Interestingly, they decided to cast virtually anyone of any background for the roles, not just strictly finding white actors. This meant that the portrayal of George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, Aaron Burr, and the main subject of this entry, Thomas Jefferson, were all played by colored actors. And for some reason, Tumblr was especially fond of this musical. This would culminate into thousands of pieces of fan art, mind you, of the actors playing the historical figures, not so much the historical figures themselves. If you know anything about US history and that time period, then you probably understand why. But yes, Hamilton fan art was damn near everywhere, including a drawing created by the artist Umbroni, also known as Jay, on September 11th, 2017. This is the infamous Thomas Jefferson Miku binder image. It portrays Thomas Jefferson as a black, trans, bisexual, furry weeaboo recovering cokehead studying art education. This is one of 4 images actually, the others being of Alexander Hamilton, John Lawrence, and Philip Hamilton. All of them equally as bizarre and convoluted as the Thomas Jefferson one. If you're wondering about the Miku binder part, by the way, it refers to the trans part of the drawing, not like a school binder. You see, many trans men and non-binary people use what's called a binder, which you strap onto your torso, and it essentially flattens and hides the appearance of breasts, giving you a more androgynous or masculine look, depending on what you're going for. This binder specifically had a Hatsune Miku print on it, which is a famous Vocaloid software from 2007. Many people quickly had a problem with this image, given that Jay was making drawings of real people and giving them fictitious identities such as being gay, non-binary, colored, etc. Not to mention the fact that most of these guys were slave owners and have done some horrible things. So romanticizing them like this by giving them quirky personalities just kind of irked a lot of people. In fact, this is a major problem that many agreed the musical had as well. There is little to no mention of slavery, which was a big issue in debate even back then, besides a few cut songs that never made it to the actual production. And while the founding fathers did do a lot of impressive things like, founding a whole country, by all means, most of them were pretty bad people, and the musical doesn't really reflect that, so it's kind of understandable why Jay's perception of these guys would be skewed. Although, to be fair, I think the main theme and purpose was motivating people to make something from nothing and rising to the top with hard work and persistence, with the backdrop of the founding of the US. This is probably the reason why Jay and many other artists didn't see anything wrong with drawing them like this. Yes, other people also drew them like this, but Jay's was the one that went viral. I'm assuming they all got their historical knowledge of the Revolutionary War from Hamilton. The next day, she'd respond to the backlash by doubling down and promising to continue drawing this type of stuff.
As many of you know, my recent character sheet got a bunch of hate on Tumblr. I got accused of homosexual erasure. It's my blood, sweat, tears, and hard work. I will continue to post. Heart emoji.
Within the following weeks, specifically the Thomas Jefferson image was posted all throughout the internet to be mocked and made fun of. To be fair, this is a really funny image given the context that this is based on a founding father, and the "I met God, she's black" sweater is just the cherry on top for ridiculousness. This got so bad that Jay ended up leaving the internet and deleting her accounts on September 24th. Now, was this tone deaf and weird? Yeah. Was this also really funny? Yeah. But did she deserve this? No, I don't really think so. Jay seemed like a really young person at the time, so I think it's fair to say she made a dumb mistake and wants to move past the incident. In fact, on September 15th, 2019, she'd make another response reflecting on what happened and all the harassment she received because of it, deciding ultimately to leave the Hamilton fandom. And then immediately got into more trouble by drawing shipping art of Aaron Hansen and Dan Avidan of Game Grumps. In June of 2020, she deleted all of her social media and decided to take a long break from the internet. Side note, do you guys remember the Hamilton artist/animator Cryptid Worm? They went by Galactobun or Scribs back then, so maybe you might know that name. I mentioned this because it seems like Jay was heavily inspired by this person, because when I first saw this image back then, I legitimately thought for a while that Cryptid Worm had made it. If you're wondering what happened to them, by the way, it turns out they got harassed by a lot of people in that fandom and rebranded. And yes, as you can tell, I was also into Hamilton back then. Inkplasm, also known as Wellwraith, is a semi-popular NSFW artist online known for their ghost, slime, and furry OCs that got a lot of attention from the wrong kinds of people, and forever ruined a generation of young Twitter artists. Inkplasm joined Twitter in March of 2018, shortly after their 15th birthday. They gained a massive following online after posting their artwork, which consisted of characters with very interesting proportions. Usually wearing revealing clothing and with the definite intention for sexual gratification by the way certain body parts were enhanced. The problem being, as mentioned before, these drawings were made by a 15-year-old, which is not good for many reasons. The biggest reason being that a plethora of fully grown adults were following and interacting with Inkplasm because of these suggestive drawings. Of course, I'm not one to victim blame when it's very much the fault of the adults here, but for Inkplasm's own safety, it was also really not a good idea to be drawing things like this and publicly posting them online. Another problem being the amount of minors which were also following and interacting with Inkplasm, being exposed to their artwork. This started becoming a bigger issue as time went on, as they gained over 40,000 followers in the span of a year. By 2020, they had expanded to other sites like Furfinity and Newgrounds. However, on August 24th of that year, the user RenoX, otherwise known as Sharb, made a call-out post on Inkplasm. The post detailed Inkplasm not only willing to draw an NSFW commission for Sharb's friend named Beta, who was a minor, but also willing to grant a discount if they sent a video of themselves jacking off in public. Beta was obviously very hesitant about doing this, given that it was a very strange request from an artist, and also because they were underage and about to send this artist CP of themselves. Now, just to be clear, Ink would have been around 17 years old at the time, which is still a minor, but holy shit, I cannot express how reckless, stupid, and irresponsible it is to ask that of someone who's also underage. Obviously, after some thinking, Inkplasm realized how bad of an idea this was and started to delete messages they had sent, before even apologizing or telling Beta about getting cold feet. Eventually, they would convince Beta to keep quiet about the whole situation and to wipe the DMs between them, even seemingly offering up a bribe in the guise of a free gift. Also alluding that it would be bad for both of them if this got out, trying to garner sympathy. Of course, none of that worked given that the information was released publicly. Just a really gross and horribly irresponsible situation all around. And while both were minors at the time, I'm still putting most of the blame on Inkplasm for even asking someone to do that in the first place and trying to cover it up. Now, many people started accusing them of grooming or being a groomer, but I don't think that's the case here, honestly. You could argue that there was a power dynamic with their high follower count, but it's a bit of a stretch to say that. Also, there's the fact that they were both the same age at the time. Not too long after, Inkplasm would make a response on Twitter, although because their account is now private and there's no archives online, this has been lost to time. However, I did find a live stream by the YouTuber For No Good Reason, in which both Inkplasm and Beta are interviewed on what happened.
And then you went to him again and asked for another commission, and that time he had lowered it all the way from $200 to $100. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then the third time he raised it back to 200, and that's when the discussion of the dick pic or the NSFW video came up. That is also correct, right?
He wanted it to be 150, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. You know, it's 125 fine. And then that's whenever he was like, oh, you know, you could. Yeah.
So this video was supposed to cover the entirety of the payment, or this was supposed to reduce the payment?
No, it was just supposed to reduce it.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Inkplasm claims this was the first and only time they had done this, harboring no malicious intent when sending those messages, and weren't even aware the person was underage beforehand. But given that information, why would you ask for nudes from someone when you don't even know their age? And what exactly was the intent behind asking someone for nude videos? Even if Beta was over 18, a minor asking for nudes from an adult is still wrong no matter which way you put it. Inkplasm also makes the claim that Beta had sent them nude images before, where they then thought it was okay to ask for more, which really muddies the water.
Had you sent him a nude at all?
I had before. Yes.
Now you
because
understand that that's illegal, correct?
Okay. That's one reason that I regretted it, and that's one reason that I wanted to wipe it, like with what he did.
Despite this incident, Inkplasm continued to post more suggestive art and grew their fanbase until they turned 18 years old, when they decided to abandon the Inkplasm name and created a full-blown NSFW account called Wellwraith in February 2021. This topic was honestly very hard to research, given the lack of archives and extreme vagueness in which people talk about Inkplasm. I always saw tweets like the Inkplasm incident, or about how they were very controversial and disliked, yet nobody expands on the details. If there's anything major I missed out on, then feel free to let me know in the comments. Also, shout out to that live stream I mentioned earlier by For No Good Reason. This topic would have been very short without it. So remember all the way back in part 1, where I talked about a guy who seemed a little too sympathetic towards John Bob? Well, we're gonna talk about him now. This is Tarhead. Tarhead was another artist in John's friend group who specialized in creepy and scary artwork, creating his Twitter in 2017. His art was honestly very well made with an extraordinary use of color and line work, even creating official works for the Binding of Isaac. Eventually, he'd get into contact with John and they'd become close friends, where Tarhead would gain thousands of followers and fans by associating with that whole community. As you know, John was outed as being a groomer in August of 2020, and like many others in that community, Tarhead also made a response to the situation. This response was very strange though. While other ex-friends of his condemned his actions and were appalled by his behavior, Tarhead seemed to downplay the situation and chalked it up to being a perverted and touch-starved simp. On September 1st, 2020, an anonymous victim would come forward after seeing that tweet and accuse Tarhead of being a groomer himself. She alleged that Tarhead had phone sex with her and they repeatedly sexted throughout early 2020, with him not even asking how old she was prior to it. Turns out she was only 15, but made sure to tell him afterwards. Although for some reason, Tarhead didn't seem bothered by this at all, despite the fact that he was 21 at the time, continuing to exchange lewd messages. Worst of all is that he allegedly convinced her to send nude photos of herself to him, where he saved the images on his phone and admitted to ejaculating to them. Eventually, he realized how f***ed of a situation this was and decided to needlessly insult and bully her to get her to leave him, trying to wash his hands of the whole thing. He even called her the N-word with a hard R, which obviously made things a lot worse. The insults and bullying from this guy who she had feelings for made her emotionally unstable, where she'd cry herself to sleep every night. After confiding about the problem she was having to her friends, she realized that Tarhead was grooming her. On August 12th of that year, she confronted Tarhead about the grooming, and he for some reason played the victim card and acted like she ruined his life, again insulting and berating her. Eventually, she'd get fed up and made the call-out post against him. People were already in shock after the John Bob situation a few days prior, and another groomer being outed in that community made things even crazier. Then there was Tarhead's response the next day, which if you're wondering was a disingenuous and sloppy apology to his audience and the victim, where he even gets the date he met the victim wrong in the first few sentences. He does provide additional context though, such as confirming he knew about the age gap and how wrong the whole thing was, and that she also had a boyfriend during all of this. In fact, the reason they stopped talking was because her boyfriend found out what was going on and put a stop to it. Tarhead quietly deactivated his account after receiving a ton of backlash from angry fans and ex-friends. The funniest part was that Leafy is here, yes, that Leafy, was apparently an idol to Tarhead. Leafy somehow found the response when it was posted and made this statement which probably crushed him. 2 weeks later, the victim was revealed to be a person named Cypher's sister, who was also an artist that's into drawing scary and creepy artwork. She would release a video on her channel explaining the whole situation in more detail and providing context. I have to be honest though, it really feels like Cypher was somewhat defending Tarhead and was still being manipulated by him. Throughout the video, she details some of her mistakes and places blame on herself for getting groomed, still holding out hope for him. Just to be clear, besides the cheating which she worked out with her boyfriend, her getting groomed by him is not her fault whatsoever. It's really sad to see her care so much about an awful person who did all that and insulted her constantly. In fact, she mentions calling him after the post went live, where he started crying and convinced her to take it down and private her account. One more thing to note is that apparently she never actually sent him nude photographs of herself, just some risque photos and videos here and there. Honestly, this is probably a good thing, but I don't really know why she lied about this, but even without that point of contention, this situation is still horrible. In the comments section, Cypher's left an update saying that Tarhead has gone to therapy and has gained a social life outside of the internet. All of this happened almost 5 years ago now, so I'm assuming, or at least hopeful, that Cypher has fully realized the extent of Tarhead's grooming and abuse, and has healed from it since then. I don't know what happened to Tarhead since then, and I don't really care. Let's just hope people like this never come back. Owlturd, otherwise known as Shen Comics, is a popular webcomic artist whose work has been spread in popularity through memes and exploitables. If you don't know, exploitable comics are meme templates, which can be easily manipulated to add to the joke or create a brand new one, using an interchangeable punchline. You've probably seen stuff like this all over the internet, by which I mean Reddit. They're mostly Reddit memes. One of those memes was a comic titled "My Bike Got Stolen Recently," posted on November 13th, 2017. While Shen's artwork being used as a meme format was very common, the joke was always unrelated to Shen or the artwork in question, but this time the comic itself was being made fun of, and Shen was the butt of the joke. Why? Well, a lot of people found it cringy and thought that the premise was dumb.
My bike got stolen recently. I was pretty bummed about it. But I think whoever stole it was probably more happy to get it than I am sad to lose it. The total happiness in the world increased. So, whatever.
Most of the critique alluded to Shen being a self-destructive, spineless doormat that just let bad things happen to him without fighting back. The comic was posted on r/cringeanarchy by the user Nikish, I don't know, as well as 4chan's Koboard to get made fun of, gaining site-wide infamy as Shen was now being referred to as a bike cuck. Eventually, the jokes and teasing would get to Shen, and on November 18th, he'd make a post on Facebook asking people to stop calling him Bike Cuck, deciding to go on a hiatus indefinitely. Obviously, given that this is the internet, people doubled down and called him Bike Cuck even more. The next day, he'd clarify by saying that him going on hiatus was actually because of personal reasons unrelated to the comic stuff. In fact, he actually said he liked all the bike memes and wanted this break to reflect on how to handle things like this in the future. Eventually, Shen would return with new comics, still going strong to this day, even poking fun at himself and that comic here and there. Another very tame entry, which I feel like we need after all the horrible people we've gone through so far. On December 2nd, 2019, the YouTuber PewDiePie revealed that he and his wife Marcia's house was broken into and robbed. A very scary and unfortunate situation that could happen to anyone, where he received a lot of support. On the 8th, Mallory Jessica Eudicious, otherwise known as SweetBeans99, created a comic which mocked what happened to him, including a straw man named New Guy, which I guess was supposed to be the antagonist of the comic. I'm assuming this mindset stemmed from some controversies PewDiePie's had in the past, with the bridge incident and whatnot, which seems to have permanently stained his reputation in the eyes of many people, including this person.
What a fucking wholesome friend.
Oh, what's so funny? That millionaire gamer bro douchebag totally got robbed.
Hey, how'd you like it if you were robbed?
Oh, wow. I can tell we're gonna be the kind of coworkers who become good friends.
Wow, really?
Hell no.
Apparently, the one we're supposed to relate to is the person laughing at the misfortune of someone else. Meanwhile, the stupid idiot is the one with empathy and kindness, getting put down for asking if they'd be okay with that happening to them. Now, personally, I think the argument of, oh, whatever, he's a millionaire, who cares, is not even a good one because, one, in today's economy, even being a millionaire won't get you that far in comparison to a billionaire, which is vastly different. And arguably who you should actually be against if you're one of those eat the rich people. Trust me when I say, slightly affluent people compared to you are not your enemy. And number 2, Marcia said that 90% of her sentimental valuables were stolen in the robbery. This isn't really a matter of just buying new stuff because you have money. Those valuables had meaning and memories attached to them, something you can't replace. This comic completely backfired and blew up in their face after getting posted, having the opposite effect intended. It quickly spread online as people found it distasteful, cringy, and toxic. Then, on New Year's Day of 2020, Canihavepromo posted the comic with this caption, which spawned numerous edits and altered endings to make it either wholesome or funny. As the comic spread, this New Guy character quickly became a fan favorite of the internet, and his wholesome and kind attitude would overshadow the original comic and its creator, Mallory. Many of the pieces even went out of their way to discourage harassment of Mallory too, which amplified its wholesome messaging. Despite this, there was still harassment of Mallory, in which they'd respond and then private their accounts. While an overwhelming majority of people were against the message of the original comic and saw New Guy as a wholesome meme, some other people thought the meme actually encouraged harassment of Mallory. This was not the first time that year Mallory would get into controversy with their comics though. On April 8th of 2020, they made a comic in which their character shoplifted from an art store, which caused more backlash, but this topic isn't about that. Since then, Mallory hasn't had much drama related to their works, and mostly just does their own thing. Although I do find it funny that they're a big Smiling Friends fan, despite how close Zach and Oni are, which makes this come full circle I guess. Fun fact, New Guy's technically the first ever meme of 2020, and subsequently the entire decade. Rory Cummings Dies, otherwise known as RCDART, was a fan artist on Tumblr and other sites, known for their comedically fetishistic and disproportionate anatomy they would include in many of their drawings. Rory had been posting to the internet since 2012 on sites like Twitter and Tumblr, where it would seem that their style was actually much more polished and nice looking compared to what I'm about to show you. They would make art for many different franchises like Marvel, Star Wars, and Steven Universe, which had their accounts grow in popularity over the course of the 2010s. It was even revealed that Rory made it into CalArts in 2016. Given this information, one would assume that their art would drastically improve now that they were being taught by professionals at an art/animation school, right? Well, the complete opposite happened. Rory's art got much, much worse. Let's take a look at some before and afters now. Before, after. Before, after. Before, after. Of course, they would take zero criticism and seem to have an inflated ego about their work, despite the backlash. This art degradation was especially prevalent in the way that they drew Captain America. Rory infamously would headcanon and interpret Steve Rogers as being transgender, more specifically a trans man. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with this, even though the canon character was born as a man. However, many had pointed out that Rory blatantly fetishized certain features of this character and was being called transphobic. In normal artwork, Steve would be drawn in a more masculine sort of way, which makes sense given that Rory's headcanon wanted Steve to transition into a man and look like that. However, they would draw multiple pieces of NSFW artwork, which inflated the chest, slimmed the waist, thickened the thighs, and overall made Steve look a lot more feminine, which completely goes against the idea they had going. And you can clearly tell this is some sort of fetish by the way it's drawn. Then there was the racism allegations, which was probably the peak of their infamy, as these two drawings I'm about to show you were trashed all over the internet in January of 2018. This is the Star Wars character Finn. Do you want to see how Rory drew this character? Look at that misshapen head, those giant red lips and fish-like appearance. My god, it doesn't even have a watermark. Let me tell you, everybody hated this drawing in particular, especially because, whether intentional or not, it really looked like a racist Jim Crow era caricature of a black person. And there was also this infamous Kylo Ren drawing, which had the exact same problems, equally being trashed for looking terrible. On January 7th, Rory would respond to the backlash with an apology, assuring that it would never happen again. Despite this, the backlash against Rory for this terrible artwork, transphobia, and racism continued as they delete their presence off the internet in March of 2018. Allegedly, they graduated from CalArts in 2020, and the only remaining trace of them on the internet is their portfolio website. On August 12th, 2009, this image of a quad amputee anime girl with bandages covering her face was posted onto the website Donboru by the user Evasion. Surrounding her is a teddy bear, flowers, and the sunlight bleeding heavily into the room, although I guess she can't really see it. This piece was created by the artist S. Zenith Lee, and only started to spread online in 2014, being reposted onto 4chan's A-board. It's a very sad and honestly kind of disturbing image that gives me a sense of dread looking at it. This is actually the second part to another piece created by Zenith that sees the girl being tortured, having her eyes, ears, mouth, and limbs hacked off in an evil and sadistic sort of way. Be careful if you want to look up part 1, by the way. It's very gory and contains a lot of blood and body horror. Zenith explains that a girl in their local community was hit by a truck and lost both her legs and one arm. This was apparently the inspiration that led to the creation of this artwork. And yes, this is centered around the chest area because this is in fact fetish art. It's called eroguro, or erotic grotesque, which is a type of fetish from Japan involving blood, gore, disfiguration, violence, mutilation, urine, enemas, or feces for sexual gratification. I'm gonna be honest, this is getting very close to the line of unacceptability for me personally. If you're into this, go crazy I guess, but I'm just gonna stand like 10 feet away from you. Anyway, the second image was redrawn on the 4chan thread to where she was recovering with cool cyborg arms smoking a cigarette. And from then on, it would take until 2019 for Twitter user DJ Chimera to introduce it to that site. And then in 2022, Intellectual Incel Group posted a version with this caption, later being used by thousands of other people as a reaction image for when something slightly inconveniences you. The joke spread like wildfire, with different edits and scenarios popping up as shown on screen, until it eventually fizzled out by 2023. I've tried to look more into Zenith, but after seeing many pieces of eroguro art while doing research, I think I'm gonna end this segment here. Thank you to the YouTuber Frankie Faye for the video on this topic. Check the link in the description below. On April 12th, 2012, the animator Gonzo SSM would upload a very disturbing animation centered around Steve and a creeper from Minecraft, which, even for 2012 standards, was a bit much for parody. Things start off relatively normal, where Steve comments on the oversaturation of Minecraft parodies around this time, which, you know, fair enough. Then as he finishes building his house, a creeper approaches behind him, but he's not taking any chances. Steve beats the ever-loving shit out of this creeper, who keeps saying, "I didn't mean any harm," while the creeper's face gets bloody and bruised from all the punches. Then, Steve whips out his Minecraft cock and wrestles the creeper to the ground, beginning to violently SA him for 30 seconds, all while you can hear the creeper cry, beg, and plead. And that's it. That's the whole animation. I kind of put this in the same boat as Racist Mario, where it's a very edgy and crude animation made back when YouTube was a lot more lax with this sort of thing. The short is still up on Newgrounds, however, only a re-upload exists on YouTube, assuming it got taken down for the very graphic depiction of SA. Fun fact, Gonzo SSM is the same animator behind many famous Tobuscus animated shorts and music videos. So, that's cool, I guess. Hey, it's me from the future. So it turns out the short is still on YouTube. However, the original upload has been completely buried by the algorithm, demonetized, and age restricted. On October 31st of 2013, the website archive.fools.us stored a very infamous and well-known piece of Sonic fetish art, which portrayed Shadow and Sonic transforming and merging into a giant toilet to be used by a fat furry just out of view. It's honestly one of the better known Sonic fetish artworks and was shared all over the internet in the 2010s when discussing this topic. Although the true origins and artist behind this masterpiece has never been found to this day. Every link is either broken or directs the user towards other sites posting the artwork, not the actual origin. Every obscure website that does claim to have the origin or names an artist ends up linking to a repost or mistakenly credits the reposter as the artist. Whoever made this really did not want to be found, as there doesn't seem to be any trace of them or any of their other artwork across the entire internet. As I mentioned in the beginning, the archive from 2013 seems to be the earliest confirmed record of that image. It's kind of rare to see someone scrub their entire identity off the internet this thoroughly, especially with something as iconic as this. Not much else to say here, it's just a really funny Sonic transformation fetish artwork. Thank you again to Frankie Faye for the video on this topic. On August 30th, 2024, the Japanese Twitter artist @Shinogiyu posted this seemingly cute and innocent drawing of a little cat on a pillow holding something in its mouth. The artwork, possibly from its initial perceived cuteness, got over 16,000 likes and was seen by a lot of people. But then you start to notice that something is off with the image. Let's zoom in on what this cat is It's a condom. It's a fucking condom. Oh, this guy's a goddamn zoophile. Obviously, after finding out, people were really disgusted and angry at what this artist drew. Not everyone felt the same way though. Other zoophiles praised the image and the artist's other works, which also contain zoophilia content. Thankfully, most of it isn't explicit, at least on this account, but man, knowing what I know now, it's just really gross. I kind of only put this in because it was trending at the time, and I didn't really know what else to put in this final tier that was infamous and also obscure, so that's why it's here. Not much else to say about it, just avoid this person if you can. Actually, you know what? I found another piece on the Japanese side of Twitter that also made me feel disgusted. I briefly want to talk about it. On February 20th, 2025, the artist Ojo199654 created a comic which was a confession to a sin he committed. The aforementioned sin detailed him stalking, grooming, and essaying a little girl while he was presumably a fully grown man. He describes waiting at a bus stop every day at the same time, waiting for a specific little girl to pass by, before eventually talking to her. The girl says that she needed money for a phone, so he manipulates her into sending him nude photos of herself in exchange for money. After a couple months of grooming, he goes over to sleep at her house, in which he convinces her to have sex with him, otherwise known as statutory. Somehow this post got over 70,000 likes on Twitter. However, I'm glad that a majority of people are rightfully calling out how disgusting and depraved this artist is and recognize the severity of the crimes committed. Even other Japanese people were upset and angry by this, which is a huge relief given how lax the laws and attitude is over there when it comes to issues like this. Not saying that a majority of Japanese people are okay with this, obviously. Unfortunately, there's also a lot of creeps who are defending this type of stuff, but that's usually just how Twitter is nowadays. I've seen conflicting reports on whether this was actually based on a true story or not, but I'm really hoping this is some sort of fucked up fiction, because God forbid this actually happened to a real young girl. Mr. Pump G, otherwise known as the Pumpkin Gentleman, is a popular artist on Twitter, mostly known for his suggestive artwork and comics that tend to go viral every now and again. His account was created in June of 2023, and things would be relatively normal, as Pumpkin grew his audience online by creating artwork and comics, eventually gaining tens of thousands of followers on places like Twitter. This is where we're going to talk about his controversies, and it should be noted that he's made a full 30-minute response video with a part 2 to all of the accusations in August of 2024, so I'm going to use that as my point of reference and include his explanations and apologies for each controversy listed. There's so many to list that I'm just going to talk about the more important ones for time reasons. I will say this though, the video has a very odd voice filter over the whole thing, and it can be kind of annoying to listen to. Just a heads up if you want to watch it yourself. The first controversy comes from April of 2024, where an 18-year-old pumpkin replies to his 16-year-old friend with this. People began making a lot of accusations towards Pumpkin for this strange response directed at a minor. Pumpkin explains that this was a very poorly worded joke and not meant to be taken seriously, as he's never had any sexual conversations with that person ever, nor does he want to. Even the 16-year-old had to make a statement saying that it was just a bad joke and nothing serious. The next controversy involves Fallen Chungus of all people, where Pumpkin calls Francis pathetic for the 100th announcement that he was going to take his own life. Pumpkin explains that he was talking about his reputation being pathetic, as Francis has been known to do this a lot as per my Fallen Chungus video. The next one involves this out of context screenshot showing Pumpkin explaining that erotic scenes and clothing were normalized for preteens to consume in Japan, almost making it seem like he's defending it. Pumpkin explains that this tweet was part of a larger response, discussing the cultural differences between what's considered too sexual for minors to be looking at in Japan versus in the West. This ties in with a bigger controversy in which he was called out for very suggestive and lewd drawings being posted on his 16+ accounts filled with minors following him. He says that since he grew up in Japan, he assumed that he could post suggestive artwork on his 16+ account because anime meant for teenage boys would also be very suggestive, if not even more suggestive. He didn't consider what he drew to be that bad for Japanese standards, but for a majority of his audience living in the West, it was a big deal. He also says he does not agree with the normalization of this in Japan, and apologizes for posting those images in the first place, making all of his accounts 18+ from now on. The tweets weren't an excuse to justify the drawings, it was just explaining where he was coming from when he posted them. The next controversy involves him allegedly talking sexually with a 12-year-old, in which he explains that the screenshots were probably faked, as they're weirdly cropped with no names or dates attached, and Pumpkin has no memory or records of ever interacting with this person. Update. So as I was working on this video, Pumpkin made a response to the YouTuber Louis McClung after he pretty much slandered him in a video he made. It turns out the messages and the person being 12 are real, but Pumpkin explains that they never initiated any sexual conversations with them, and he didn't even know about their true age until much later, also noting around this time he was 16 to 17, cutting off contact once he turned 18. Pumpkin apologizes for even letting this person talk sexually to them, and he should have definitely set boundaries and stopped any sort of sexual conversation, even if it was mostly one-sided.
I finally found out who was behind these screenshots, because their friend reached out to me. And turns out this person was my very first mutual online. Okay, so they are real, it is confirmed. The reason why I didn't remember them was because they never told me that they were 12. They told me that they were 14 to 15 years old, while I was 17 at the time. The reason that they lied to me about their age, as their friend put it, was to keep their age mysterious and for their, to protect themselves and for their safety. But that does the opposite, and it will in fact put them in danger, because in situations like these will happen. Although I never initiated or started any conversations related to NSFW topics or suggestive topics, I did allow them to joke and talk about it. Reason given that when I moved here, right, I was already in high school. I already had 14 to 15-year-old friends who joke about very, very similar things and would also make sex jokes and yada, yada, and whatnot. So I thought, okay, what's different from online and in real life, So I'm like, okay, yeah, you could joke about it. And although I did try to set a boundary, although it was a weak attempt where I'm like, yeah, you can open up to me or whatever, just, no actual love feelings or NSFW pics. No, I don't want that. Stop. However, even though this person did lie to me about their age and whatnot, it was still my responsibility, given that even though I wasn't really an adult yet, I was still the older one. Right? I still should have known better. I should have been more responsible. I should have taken the initiative to end the conversation or be very firm with my boundary or just cut contact with them, which I did right after I turned 18. After I turned 18, I realized how weird the friendship was given our age difference. And it's like, yo,
He has admitted to playfully flirting with his friends whom he didn't know the ages of as well, in which he also apologizes for the unprofessionalism when talking to people, saying it won't happen again. Although it is kind of crazy how often this seems to happen with Pumpkin. Now, those are most of the serious allegations out the way, but there's a chunk of the video dedicated to petty claims he honestly could have just ignored. Like, many people accused him of faking his identity on another account and pretending to be his cousin, but what exactly would he have to gain from this? Even if it was true, I don't see the big deal besides he's a liar. I don't want to speculate about a random guy's identity or their family members, but there's also accusations of him lying about his skin tone / body type and his Japanese ancestry for some reason. For the skin tone / body type part, he does a decent job at debunking the claims, and honestly, even if he did have a darker skin tone than what he drew, or he didn't look like how he drew himself, is this really the biggest deal? I get it if you're faking your race or something, but I don't really see the issue in drawing yourself like 2 shades darker or lighter. For the Japanese ancestry being fake, I think this part is also decent where he proves his identity with his Japanese passport, but my only point of contention is that allegedly, the way he speaks Japanese is very amateurish, and not like how a person who spent all their formative years in Japan would speak it. I don't speak the language, but many people in the comments pointed out how he makes very basic mistakes that he should definitely know if he was born and raised there. Paired with how well versed he is with Western culture and speaking English for somebody who only moved to the US in their teenage years, it's just very strange. Besides that, I think Pumpkin overall is not some malicious pedophile trying to groom kids. He just seems like a very immature and irresponsible young adult who doesn't know how to handle internet fame and needs to learn a lot, especially with how he interacts with fans and minors who are fans. I think the apology video did clear a lot of stuff up, and honestly, I can only hope he actually learns from his mistakes and can be a better person. There's a lot I paraphrased and skipped over due to time, but there's many videos about this situation you can find on YouTube, like this one by HarleyTBS. On June 16th, 2023, a furry comic artist named Nicole, otherwise known as Peace Wolf, would post a comic involving a divorce from her now ex-husband Foxglove. The comic goes into detail about how Fox coerced her into a relationship at 17 and married her when she was 21. Nicole described feeling pressured to conform to Fox's ideal of a perfect wife, which led to a lot of emotional abuse as described by her. She also accused him of cheating, citing times where he planned on having sex with other women, including a close friend of hers. It also goes into detail about their own sexual fetishes, which I'm gonna skip over because I really have no interest in learning more than I have to about this topic. Eventually, she developed a friendship and confided about her marital struggles with 2 other furries, named Jason FX Grant, and Caitlin Cabs Corner Kelly. Now, if you weren't already aware of who these people are, it should definitely be noted that Jason Grant is a known pedophile, groomer, and racist within the furry community, starting a relationship with the then 15-year-old Caitlin around 2012 when he was 21. There's a lot of other allegations against him, and I'm barely scratching the surface of what Jason has done, so here's a video by the YouTuber Lanza explaining everything. Today I just want to focus on the comic. Well, eventually this friendship between Nicole, Jason, and Caitlin would turn sexual, as Nicole and Fox would invite them to stay at their house. Things get very strange, as Nicole describes experimenting with cuckolding by sleeping with Jason and Caitlin in front of Fox, who was apparently very enthusiastic about the whole thing at first. Fox started to get jealous and emotional from everything going on, and would curl up into the fetal position while crying as drawn here, and also try to deliver them all cookies as they were sleeping with each other in the bedroom. At the end of the visit, Nicole made the decision to divorce Fox for good, and this is where, as described by Nicole, he would have a mental breakdown and even drive to her friend's house where she was staying with a gun. The police got called and eventually she would get away from him. This would not stop Fox, as he sent her multiple threats and even tried stealing her car at one point. It should also be noted that apparently a few months prior, they both agreed to adopt a 17-year-old teenager, in which Nicole would go no contact with them after they found a decent family to live with following the divorce. Given who these people are, I think it's actually for the best that this kid is staying with someone else now. At the end of the comic, Nicole describes finalizing the divorce and goes on to praise Jason and Caitlin for the support, despite the fact that she's sleeping with a pedophile and his victim. I know, it's finally over. Imagine how I felt having to do research for this. So, Fox is an abusive and emotionally unstable groomer that should be in jail, assuming that what Nicole is saying is true and not a lie constructed by the 3 of them. Jason is a pedophile that's convinced 2 young women to enter a relationship with him, one of whom was underage when they started dating. Of course, he should also be in jail. Caitlin is a victim of grooming who is in complete denial. And from what I'm seeing, she's also a manipulative asshole. And Nicole is a victim of abuse who decided the best way to divorce her husband was to cuckold him with other horrible people. I just think everybody in the story is a piece of shit. After this was posted, for some reason it was spread all throughout the Twitter algorithm, and people who weren't involved in any furry stuff like me were subjugated to this whole mess. There were even memes made about Fox getting cucked, which is just insane. Apparently these three also created a furry convention called Free For All, in which they'd allow Nazi furries to attend, among many other incidents of racism and homophobia, where Nicole would step down following the information I just shared. As of now, Nicole, Jason, and Caitlin are in a three-way relationship doing OnlyFans content together, and Fox seems to have vanished from the online space. Okay, now that we've officially finished up the iceberg, we can go over all the stuff I forgot about or missed. Thank you to everyone who left a suggestion in the comment section. I'm now briefly going to go over each person as fast as I can because this video is getting kinda long and I'm getting tired.
So this is where Major Cloog lives. I grew minors!
Ryan, otherwise known as Major Cloog, was an animation YouTuber who uploaded short comedic cartoons, often involving blood and gore in some way for every upload. This amassed him over 100,000 subscribers by late 2022. On January 26, 2024, a 16-year-old girl named Madison would publish a document detailing a year-and-a-half-long abusive relationship that she had with Ryan when she was 11 to 12 and he was around 16 to 17. They became friends in 2018 while she was in the 5th grade and he was a sophomore in high school. And she would open up to him about her abuse and struggles until eventually they began dating in May of 2019. Things got sexual quickly as Ryan self-admittedly referred to himself as a pedophile, sending very gross and lewd messages to Madison, who was still in elementary school. Some of the messages even imply he was receiving lewd images from this girl while they were dating. And whenever he was questioned about things, he'd always lie about her age, showing that he knew what he was doing was wrong. Things quickly spiraled as the relationship fizzled out by November 2020. Ryan would apologize to Madison in January of 2023, but she released this document anyway to bring awareness to his crimes and move on with her life. Since then, Ryan has made no attempt to defend himself or respond to the situation, deciding to go inactive on all of his accounts. Madison says that she's in a much better headspace now and has been doing better ever since. Leighton Allen LaBute, otherwise known as Dollyflesh, was a small claymation animator on YouTube who created strange and disturbing fetish content, which eventually escalated into real life. Leighton began uploading around 2016, creating claymation shorts, usually involving violence, blood, and gore in some sort of way. Most videos involved serial killers, some made up and some real, torturing, dismembering, and cannibalizing victims, which he seemed to take great interest in, even idolizing people like John Wayne Gacy. This was so prevalent in his life that he would make a video pretending to eat the flesh out of a clay doll he made for some sort of cannibalization fantasy, as well as a video where he made clay breasts that spurted milk. Now, many would argue that people can create disturbing fictional content and be of sound mind in real life, like the creators of many successful horror movies, or even fellow creators on YouTube like David Firth and Meat Canyon. And that's a valid point. This is not the case here though, because on May 15th, 2019, Leighton uploaded a video in which he tortured and killed multiple hamsters by stabbing, crushing, drowning, and microwaving them. Obviously, these were taken down, and somehow this incident flew under the radar of the general public, as he also started to express views relating to being an incel, including videos where he created clay dolls of himself torturing women and animals. About a year later, he would upload the videos again, but this time to Reddit. Luckily, there was a lot more attention given towards Leighton's actions this time around, as only a week later, he would finally be arrested on 3 counts of animal cruelty. Although somehow he was given a chance for bail and managed to escape jail time. This led to protests from people in the community who heard about what happened, but it ultimately led nowhere. A year later, in June of 2021, Leighton would plead guilty to the charges, where he was put under an 18-month conditional sentence and 4 to 5 years of supervision. When asked why he did what he did by police, Leighton said he was just bored and to him it was entertaining. Jesus Christ. His channel was terminated in January of 2022, and Leighton hasn't been heard from since. Given his views about women, his interest in school shootings, and the research done about people who harm small animals, I think it's safe to say Leighton is a danger to himself and other people and should definitely be in jail. I've seen this song and dance over and over again for almost every mass shooter in recent memory, and Leighton seems like he's headed down the same path without professional help. Marie, otherwise known as canihavepromo, or Lottie, is a 17-year-old Thai animator and artist on Instagram and TikTok, known for their early 2000s inspired anime style and references to 4chan culture. As she began to grow her fanbase on these sites, a friend of hers named Catcell would begin to groom and manipulate her into drawing and participating in some really horrible things, such as lolly art, racism, school shooting glorification, gore, and other stuff in that nature. There isn't much of an archive of Marie's accounts anymore, given that most of them have been deleted, but from my understanding, she was popular in 2023 and 2024, until a document was made about her calling her out for all the things mentioned before on December 20th, 2024. The document contains a lot of evidence of the kinds of things Marie drew, with screenshots backing the claims up. So I recommend reading through it if you want more details, although heavy NSFW warning because not much is censored. Honestly, while people do rightfully call out Marie for these horrible drawings and animations, most of the blame should be put on Catcell, who seems to be a racist pedophile that idolizes mass shooters. This guy is basically the reason she ended up the way she is, and judging from her new Twitter account, it seems like she wants to move on after getting doxxed and harassed by people. I will say, it is also very concerning that she hasn't tweeted since December of 2024, and has also made tweets alluding to suicide. I honestly hope she's okay because this should not have happened to someone so young and talented. Puppychan is a popular NSFW artist on Twitter, mostly known for his comic series involving a timid blind girl named Blindy, who gets ruthlessly bullied and tormented by all of the people around her. A lot of the controversy around this artist stems from the graphic depictions of Blindy getting bullied, assaulted, maimed, and tormented in a very distressing way as described by other people. Most opinions on the artwork seem to agree that it's definitely meant to evoke strong feelings from the viewer, as you're obviously meant to feel bad and emotional over this poor girl being treated this way, which completely elevates rare moments in which she does receive some sort of happiness. In fact, many have reacted so strongly to these comics that some artists have gone out of their way to draw Blindy in comforting, wholesome, and happy situations to contrast the harshness of Puppychan. Funnily enough, in one comic she received a puppy after the artist reached 100,000 followers, and all of his fans spent weeks trying to figure out how the dog was going to die, only for it to be a staple character in recent times. Seeing this type of stuff isn't really my thing, to be honest, but if it's up your alley, then fine by me. Recently though, it seems like Puppychan has been shipping Blondie and Blindy, so if you want to see that, then be my guest. Matthew Dalen Littlemore, otherwise known as Animator320, is an animator on YouTube known for his series Cartoon Mania, being animated entirely in the software OpenOffice somehow, which hasn't received an update since 2011. The series involves him living in a giant house with all 320 of his original animated characters, even producing a movie at one point, which has over 1 million views as of today. In June of 2020, many of the cast members and production crew left because of Matthew creating NSFW arts of multiple underage characters and inserting NSFW lines into multiple scripts, one of which notably saw his characters who were labeled as children doing things like belly dancing in a lewd manner. When confronted about this odd creative choice, Matthew had a massive argument with many crew members, which devolved into emotional abuse according to some.
Matthew, you have to truly understand that these people are voicing characters that you create, and seeing that this is what your characters are like, these guys feel uncomfortable working on this. In fact, it sounds like your MS really wants to cry right now after seeing after hearing what you're gonna have Timmy and Tanya do, and that was not the best thing to see. I honestly really feel sorry for these two, and I feel like now it just looks like you're gonna make these two like read this stuff and then make them do this and all this stuff, or basically like that. Help you out the best we can, support you when you're depressed, help you guide you out of this, and give our criticisms the best we can. We did the best and honest ways as possible, but like I said before, you didn't go with it, and we felt like you spat in our faces, and you just keep doing it. I'm sorry.
So like a week ago, when I sent you that message, I really meant it. After seeing the stuff that you've done, like, I thought you were a genuinely good, nice guy, but like, after seeing that stuff, I don't know, it hurts. It really hurts. That's all. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. I already said it.
I honestly think he's just speechless.
everything that you said is true. And I've become such a horrible person.
Production of the series was then halted due to many people deciding to stop working for Matthew, who then deleted most of his accounts, deciding to go on a break. Matthew came back in 2023, reactivating his channel and continuing with more cartoons to this day. I'll be honest, this was very hard to research, because Matthew copyright strikes a lot of things relating to the drama and himself, so hopefully I won't be targeted next. Vivian Medrano, otherwise known as Vivziepop, is the founder of Spindlehorse Toons and the creator of the TV shows Has Been Hotel and Helva Boss. She's gained a massive success online and in the animation industry with her cartoons and connections she's made throughout the years, which got Amazon to pick up both her shows for multiple seasons. Regardless about how you feel about either show writing-wise, which honestly can be its own separate topic, she's still a very influential figure in the indie animation scene, alongside the amazing Digital Circus and Smiling Friends. Despite this, Vivian has gotten into many controversies over the years, spanning from petty rumors that are kind of blown out of proportion to actually pretty serious allegations of misconduct. I'm gonna try and stick to the more serious ones for time reasons, but there's a long list of other smaller things you can find on your own time. The first major controversy comes from a former employee of Spindlehorse named Erin Frost on June 22nd, 2022. She alleges that Vivian overworked and underpaid several employees, as well as badmouthing other shows and creators behind closed doors. If you tried to quit the team, allegedly Vivian would talk with other production companies and creators and blacklist you from the industry. People were initially skeptical of a lot of these accusations and wanted proof. Later in October, Erin would post several private documents and DMs showing very shaky evidence, which was called out by several current employees. A lot of them talked about their positive experience working with Spindlehorse and debunked a lot of misinformation that Erin was sharing. Erin would start tweeting a lot of insane accusations in the coming months, including leaking personal employee information and more private DMs between multiple employees. She then deleted her social media and hasn't been seen since. Honestly, this seems like an open and shut case of a disgruntled employee trying to get back at Vivian for personal reasons. There's little to no credible proof provided by Erin, several other employees' testimonies contradict a lot of claims made by her, and the leaking of private information was just completely uncalled for and proved nothing in the end. The second major controversy comes from a lot of old and out of context screenshots on Discord, which show Vivian badmouthing someone and alluding to them being agender as disingenuous and like those privileged white girls who pretend to be trans all of a sudden. Assuming these screenshots are real and that it's Vivian speaking, then yeah, that's a pretty awful thing to say about a person. This coincides with other leaked DMs showing similar toxicity. The third major controversy is from her previous artwork she made, which contained a lot of potentially offensive elements, including confusion about the ages of some of the characters that are depicted in NSFW scenarios. Vivian has since apologized for the offensive artwork, which she made back in 2012 when she was 19. There's also an accusation about tracing, but these are very obviously homages to different pop culture pieces and media. Now, I'm not really a fan of Vivian's work or her style of comedy. I gave the pilot a watch in 2019 and it just wasn't for me. But I really feel like a lot of these accusations and allegations are extremely overblown and not worthwhile, except when it comes to her taking criticism because, oh boy, does she need to learn to log off sometimes. Are there things to criticize Vivian for? Of course, there's plenty, especially in her TV shows. But if you're gonna do so, make sure they're credible and actually have some weight to them, unlike 99% of the allegations against her currently. I don't necessarily think Vivian is a bad person, to be honest. She just has some issues to take care of here and there. And that is going to conclude the full infamous internet art/artist iceberg. Thank you, a million times thank you for sticking with me for this whole thing. I tried my best to explain each entry in detail, and I hope I did a good job. And I'm sorry if your comment didn't make it, I could only include so much. Have a good night, everybody.